me move this over. Hello, I can see there's a lot of enthusiasm in the room. Fantastic. Welcome everybody to the February Shade Tree Committee. We'll kick it off with Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Super. So first order of business is approval of the January meeting minutes. Any comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to residence business. So we have a new grading permit, 212 and 216 Spruce Tree Road. And I understand you are not removing any trees.
Correct.
Super. So if you can just introduce yourself and just walk us through your plan, and probably what we'll be most interested in is how you are protecting the existing trees.
Sure.
Okay.
My name is Jim Musselman. I'm with Yawn Engineering. We're the civil engineers for the project. This is the existing conditions plan. The applicants own both properties and kind of treat them as one. Legally, they're separate, but that's part of what they're doing here is they're going to create a driveway that doesn't shoot straight up the hill like it does right now. It's going to kind of weave, and I'll show that on the next page. As part of that, they're removing that portion of the existing drive that's in red over here. Okay. And then they're going to redo some walks out front and out back. This is the proposed plan. Now you can see the driveway starts over on this lot, sweeps up. It's not as steep. It's a little easier. And then they are installing a parking area and some walkways as well, and a couple little walking paths. One of the other things they're doing is flattening the grade up in the back here for like a little, it's shown as a baseball field for his son. Stormwater management for the new improvements is down here, pipe system in the front yard. There's already two existing, one over here and one right over here that we're leaving, and we haven't altered the drainage patterns for those. In terms of protecting the trees, we're proposing tree protection fencing anywhere along grading between the trees, down here along these trees as well. And really the bulk of the grading that's going on right here is just filling where the existing driveway was cut in. So there's no cut really going there other than for the system. It's majority just fill right in where the existing drive was.
Can you speak about the tree protection fencing, like around that driveway, the trees that are shown there?
Yeah, we show, so there is an outlet pipe out of the system right here, so we're giving them just a little narrow workway there to get that outlet pipe through. Otherwise, we're maximizing pulling the tree protection up against the grade here and over here, anywhere they're getting close with the grading to the tree. Mm-hmm. We're putting the tree protection up against the grading.
Okay. And towards the upper left, it looks like there's a large tree there as well.
Up here?
No, to the left.
Sorry. Oh, here.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We do have where we're cutting in to get the new entrance in, we also have tree protection fencing protecting that tree as well.
Okay.
Ian, could you please zoom in on the plan a little bit for the Shade Tree Commission? Thank you. Excuse me, so the tree right near the property line where you show the tree protection, it looks, I know these are just symbols, but it looks like it's well under the canopy. Mm-hmm. To the right Yes, sir.
That
right
one.
there.
Yeah, I mean, we could, it's just in order to allow them to fill that and give them a smooth grade. We could pull that away, protect more of the canopy, and then there'd be a little bit of a ditch left by the drive. I mean, we're not really cutting at all.
So that, what I would make a recommendation to the Shade Tree Commission is, if you're interested, would be to note on the plan, according to the arborist, some type of root feeding and some other remediation for that tree. And also, understanding your filling, which may compact the roots. Perhaps we ask for the appropriate compensatory trees now, in the event that that tree should go, or have it on the plan. That's up to the Shade Tree Commission, just a suggestion.
Yeah. From my own point of view, I would prefer if we can give you and the owner advice on how best to do this to preserve that tree.
Sure.
And then if that's not possible and the tree dies and it has to be taken down, then we can talk about the compensatory requirements. Yeah, and I don't know if it's possible that the way you have the tree protection fencing, that maybe that's how it is initially, until you put that pipe in, and then once it's put in, you pull out the protection fencing.
Yeah, and we can do that, and we can put
Okay.
that in the sequencing as well.
Okay. Okay.
To put that back.
The only thing, Madam President, we don't know when that dies, we're not involved anymore. If that dies.
Do you know how large that tree is?
32.
Oh, we
32
would
inch
be
oak.
involved.
It's a heritage tree, so that's what concerns me.
I have a
But
question.
that would be the trigger that would, if it does have to be taken down, they would have to come before us, so we would definitely be involved.
Can you go to page 1?
Sure.
The driveway is shown in pink that you're putting in.
That's what we're removing on page 1.
Okay, so the new driveway would be under the tree or in the same general?
So the existing drive came up through here, straight up through here.
Yeah.
The new drive starts all the way, it's in this gray area, starts over on the other property and comes up.
So basically, the shade tree protection is for the removal of the blacktop that exists now.
Yeah, why we're here because of the excavation for the system exceeds the limits, and I
Because what I'm saying is the disturbance is well off the root system of that tree. Even though the shade tree protection looks like it's under the tree,
yeah.
the area to be disturbed is quite a distance from that root matter.
Definitely where we're cutting is,
okay.
we're filling a little bit closer.
So Steve, I think it's an exaggeration. The shade tree protection exaggerates the actual disturbance area.
So my only concern is if it comes back as a hazardous tree, even as a heritage tree, there'll be no compensatory requirements. And it could be 5 years from now. But, so filling is definitely better than cutting. There's no doubt. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. But
Yeah.
chances are, in 3 or 4 years, they put in a hazardous tree report, Mr. Hosbach reviews it, and it goes away. But they're just suggestions to the board, whatever you wish to do.
Yeah.
Do we know how much fill there potentially would be on top of the root?
About a maximum of a foot.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so any other questions or comments?
I just have a curiosity question. And so the second property, is that another house on there? So they would have no plans ever to need additional driveway to that or anything?
That has, it's kind of tough to see on the plan, that has its own driveway already. Over here, a
Okay.
big parking area behind it.
Okay, yeah,
And
I
it
didn't
connects
notice that.
over to the property already.
Okay.
And there's a proposed easement on this drive over here. And eventually they may combine the lots, but for right now they have.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
One question, you're doing grading in the back?
Correct.
And how are we going to get up there with the equipment? Or how much grading is there? Do you know how many yards?
I don't have that number offhand. It wasn't a lot. I think we did it real quick. But I could get that.
So you're going to keep the driveway on the left property?
Yes, correct. All of this is to remain,
And is there any trees in between, or is there access going up the middle there, right where you're
yeah,
at?
right between here. There's definitely access through here.
And is there trees there? Or?
There are not. There's
There are
just a
not.
couple small 4-inch evergreens down here. But yeah, there's no trees between this building and the pool.
I can't see the grade levels. Are they, is it hilly or is it the contour?
Yeah, I mean, they're 1-foot contours. So,
So you can get equipment
you
back
can
in?
get, yeah, it's not super steep.
Yeah, because that's probably the only access you have. If you go up the other side, you have a bunch of trees.
Yeah.
So you'd want to make sure that access is cut off to where the driveway is and right up the middle.
Yeah.
If we can make a note of that, so none of the trees on the right.
You don't want them running up
Yeah.
along this side.
Yeah, because there's no tree protection, and
Yeah.
the right side, there's none either. Or is there?
No, there's not.
Well, there's a big tree right at the back corner that you might want to drive on the roots, on the right side. All right. So, as long as you're
Yeah,
not
we
going
can
over
show
any
that
trees.
path
Yeah.
being through here.
All right, cool.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay. We wish you luck with your heritage tree.
very
And we
much.
hope not to see that on the
Yeah,
hazardous tree removal list.
Absolutely.
Okay, super,
Thank you very much.
Yep. So next on the agenda is 857 Milmar, 14 trees removed.
So, Madam Chair, I just want
Yes.
to preface this. So I have spoken to the resident, and she has agreed to do the compensatory trees. There was a misreading of the ordinance. I don't think there's anything nefarious here.
Okay.
But our ordinance does require the resident to come to you, and our only request is they show whatever they're going to come up with on the grading permit plan, and that would satisfy it from a staff level.
Okay,
Hi.
great, hello.
So my name is Allison Gamba. I'm a new resident to the state and to Radnor Township. My husband and I purchased a home, 857 Milmar, that we were hoping to renovate. And in the past, I'm a designer and I specialize in renovating and saving old homes. And so in the past, what I've done before when we moved from New York, I always try and read the ordinances. I always look forward as far as, what we're looking to do. We're obviously trying to beautify the home and the property. We hope to spend the rest of our years here. And we were very excited to actually be able to buy a property that had trees on it, and a lot of trees. My husband likes the woods, and we came from Long Island where we didn't have much of that. After bringing in some contractor estimates and whatnot, we had a lot of issues with some of the trees in the front, with equipment getting down. We were there for a windstorm. They were really swaying because the prior owners had lived there for 45 years and really hadn't taken care of anything. So I was very concerned because I lived through Hurricane Sandy, where we really had a lot of demolition happen in New York, given trees that really weren't taken care of. And again, in the past, in reading ordinances, it was always, you always had these heritage trees situations, and those were the ones that needed a Radnor, or a town tree person, permits, whatnot. It was always in the past where, as long as they were non-heritage trees, you should have no problem taking them down. And that's how I misread the ordinance. I missed the non part, and when I got the phone call, I was taken aback, right away. Oh my God, I read it wrong. I looked online, I read it. I found out who do I need to speak to in order to show what I'm looking to do, which is plant a lot of trees going forward.
Yeah.
We do feel like we have to replace what we've taken down and then some, because that's the look we're going for. We're going for, a wooded look and, to really match the neighborhood. So that's when I approached Steve, sat down, spoke to him, talked about the fact that I did want to add trees, especially from the list of what's approved and what's expected of the area. So, I came forward, tail between my legs. I completely apologize, and unfortunately, I can't go back in time.
Yeah.
But I'm here to show good faith and show that I'm looking to add to the property and whatnot.
Yeah, and Allison, thank you. We appreciate that. And actually, one of the things we're trying to do this year is be more proactive and welcome new residents to the township and tell them, hey, by the way, there's an ordinance here. We're here to help. And yes,
Yeah.
there are some compensatory requirements. So I think it goes both ways. We're trying so that new residents don't have to come and search for our ordinance and
Right,
try and
right.
interpret it. So I think
I mean,
it's great
usually
that you
I'm
did
pretty
that.
good with that. It was just, I read it wrong, and
Yeah.
that's why I was so caught off guard. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're not heritage trees. I know I can take them down. I'm planting all these other trees. So, I apologize. I mean, I'm human. We make mistakes.
That's okay. Do you have a plan that you want to
So,
show
yes,
us
so
of
I do-
where you're going in the future? Yeah, and Trish, just so you know, our monitors don't seem to be working. So we can look up there. That's okay.
So right now, I mean, it's still, I would say, a little bit early as far as I want to kind of see what the right trees for the property is. The property slopes down, and there is water runoff that we're very concerned about. So I'm trying to get, we want to add some evergreens. We want to add a little more lushness, but I also want to add trees that are going to be beneficial for that water runoff to soak it up. So I'm thinking of things like a weeping willow or things that do well in those in that type of area. So this is kind of just the tip of the iceberg. Steve had said I had to put 18 trees down there. I have about 3 on each side here, and then added some on these sides. But I mean, we're looking to add a lot more than that. And I really want to kind of try and group them where it looks very natural. It doesn't look like a big, row of hedges. So that's why I kind of started right now with the evergreens. The 2 that I put in were the Green Giants and the Ilex Nellie Stevens, just to add a little more, protection around.
Right.
And then I want to add some, other coloring trees and, trees that drop leaves and whatnot.
Right. And Allison, when I did the quick calculation, and Steve, please correct me if I'm off here, I got a total of 25 trees would be required. Because there are 7 trees, and it sounds like you're going to get there anyhow.
That's fine. I mean, I'm going to say we're at least going to plant 30, if not, more than that. But I mean, I can guarantee you 30 if
Yeah.
that.
The
if that
main
helps.
thing is, from staff standpoint, is that trees are shown on the plan, so that when our inspector goes out to view the grading permit,
Right.
he can verify that they're done in whatever quantity or type the shade tree. And I gotta say, the resident came right in, we talked right away, again, she was great to work with. So whatever the Shade Tree Commission feels from a quantity and species type, we just want it noted on the plan, so when Doug goes out,
Okay.
he can verify that they're in.
Yeah, and I think also for Trish's record, because we keep track of this, the total number would actually be 28 trees, because I missed the 128-inch number, right? And it sounds like you're going to be fine on that. And what I get out of that is, it's 28 trees, and I think 14 would have to be large canopy.
Okay.
And large canopy meaning a tree that would be 50 feet or higher.
Okay.
Were any of the
14.
trees that were removed hazardous by any
Yeah.
means?
I didn't have them inspected as hazardous, but a lot of them were split at the bottom,
Okay.
which, tends to be more of a issue usually for falling over.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You wouldn't happen to have any photos of the property before they were cut down or during? Or anything?
I
Okay.
might, I'm not positive if I took any specific
Okay.
photos ahead of time.
Right.
Do you know what type of trees they were?
I think there were some pines, I'm not. I'm
Some
not
pines
an
that were
arborist, I'm
split?
sorry. Yeah, yeah.
And they were up next to the house?
They were right, so that the house is on a slope below, so they were right, there's the slope, they were pretty much most in here. There's the slope and then the driveway and then the house. So, as far as coming down, it's coming down right on the house.
Is that a wet area where you just pointed out?
The front of it is not. Back here is a creek.
Okay.
So that's where, what happens is because of the slope, you get a little bit of water runoff over here, which is what I really want to kind of, figure out the right type of trees for there that would collect the water.
Yeah, I
and-
mean, there are some good species for that environment,
Yeah.
so.
Matt, do you want to recommend any? I know we have a full recommended tree list.
We have a list
Yes,
on
and I
our.
know, I was going through it, and
But are there ones
it's
that
a
you
lot.
want to recommend
I
that
think
would
you should
absorb
just
the
go through
water?
I think you should go through the list when you have a half hour, and you'll
Okay.
see some of the notations are trees that thrive in a moist or wet environment, like,
Okay.
like a cypress or bald cypress or trees like
Okay.
that. But James, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's any number of
and
good trees for that environment.
Yeah, look through the list and go through, and either probably John or myself, if you ever have questions, we could help you along the way.
Okay,
All right.
great. Thank you.
And I also think that instead of doing the 28 trees, because we don't know which ones were hazardous, and it sounds like you're planting it anyway, but stick with Steve's original thought, which is at least one for every tree. I think that's kind of fair, since we didn't know. But you're probably going to plant 30 trees anyway.
Yeah.
At some point.
Oh,
so
definitely.
Probably doesn't mean anything, but.
Yeah, yeah. I think for the record, we'll just keep it fair because it's documented how many are coming out. We'll just say 28 trees, 14 are large canopy. It sounds like the plan and where you're going to be headed in that direction. So I think the question to the Shade Tree Committee is, do we need Allison to come back with that plan that shows the tree type and the location? Or can this be basically approved with that comment?
I would like to see a plan.
Allison, do you mind coming back once you have?
Voted, though, by my committee members.
Any thoughts?
Are you okay with planning
Yeah, I mean,
compensatory?
I have no problem planning any of this or coming back and showing you guys. I mean, the only thing that's a little tough for me was because we're living in a rental right now, and
Yeah.
we're just hoping to get the grading permit so
Yeah.
we can live somewhere. I'm
Right.
getting a little nervous about that, but
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we won't hold you up.
Okay.
So once you have a better idea of what you want to plant and the location, if you can just bring it back here, and
Sure.
then we'll approve it. But basically, it's 28. You can use the recommended tree guide.
Okay.
But we're happy to give you any advice that would be helpful.
Okay.
But it
Eileen,
sounds,
would it be okay if, because she cannot get her grading permit until this plan is reviewed by us?
oh, I didn't realize that.
So why don't we
Yeah.
do this? Why don't you send me the plan? I'll come out, review it real quickly, and then I'll provide a memo to the shade tree.
I think that's fine. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
And thank you for catching the right number of compensatory trees. But
Yeah, we're good at that math stuff. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so all in favor of approving with the suggestion that John just made? Aye. Great. Thanks,
Thank you
Allison.
very
Good
much.
luck. Of course. Yeah, sure.
Is there any rule as to
We have that rule.
Is there any rule as to who needs to plant the trees? Is there an approved list of landscapers or?
We have an approved list of contractors that you need to use to take down trees, but not to plant
But
trees.
not to put them back?
Not for
No.
planting, no.
Okay, I just wanted, okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
all we need to see is the plan, very specific species of trees, and that way you'll meet Doug Meter, your inspector, and in the end, before your grading permit's closed out, he just needs to be able to see that whether you planted them or whoever, those trees are in the ground and doing well.
Right. And we do say that the trees need to be at least 2.5 inches to 3-inch diameter, so they're, around 3-4 foot trees when they're planted.
And to scale if you could. So I'm not sure if you need to hire a designer or somebody to draw this up for you or whatever. There's great companies. Simone Collins is out there. There's other companies you can call. All right.
Whoever's doing your grading permit can drop these on there for you, whoever did those plans. So you're,
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. So that's it for the resident applications. Okay. So my proposal would be that we skip over the goals for now. If we have time at the end of the meeting, let's tackle them, but otherwise we'll table that for the March meeting, which is item number 7. Okay. So then I would propose that we go to, I would say item 8, let's take care of the tree trenches, and then let's go to new business and go to item D, the sense of the Board of Commissioners. Okay?
Eileen,
Yes.
Lisa had to leave, and she
Yep.
would be back at 7:30. So if we can hold off for the, the 476 up until she gets back.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Thank
why I was
you.
going to try and cover tree trenches first.
We
Perfect.
also have the Radnor Tap Trail here as well.
Oh, super. Okay,
So if we
good.
want to bring them on, so we can get them out of there and then go to our business.
Yeah, that's fine. So we can go to new business, letter C, the Radnor Trail, Tap Trail.
So, Madam Chair, we have tonight Peter Simone, Principal of Simone Collins, who's going to review with you the tree removal and compensatory plantings proposed for the Radnor Tap Trail, specifically at the Radnor Senior High School, for your review and comment.
Good evening. Thanks very much for your time tonight. My name is Peter Simone. We've been working on this project in one form or another for about 6 years, starting with the master plan for trails and greenways in the township. And hopefully here we go, hit on the right thing. This was, first, that's the memo from Mr. Hosback. And here's the plans that were sent to you, hopefully you had in your packet. And there's also a memo that we wrote to the school district several months ago, and I'll probably refer to that. That's probably the easiest thing to follow along with. I should mention also on our team is traffic planning and design and AD Marble Associates. The plans are in basically near final stage. We have our NPDS permit. We have all our approvals. This went through the PennDOT process, through the ECMS project. So even though it's a trail, it was designed with the same standards as a highway. The final details of the project in terms of securing the easements from the school district and 2 other property owners are underway. Mr. Rice is handling that. At the high school, it's necessary, of course, for stormwater management in our NPDS permit. And I should just orient you. The trail on the high school property is running parallel to Lancaster Avenue from Radnor Chester Road all the way along Route 30. It turns the corner up to King of Prussia Road and runs the length of King of Prussia Road. There, we're essentially replacing the existing 5-foot sidewalk with a 10-foot wide multi-purpose trail, and the trail along Route 30 is also 10-foot multi-purpose. That section of Route 30 is probably the only section of Route 30 that doesn't have a sidewalk, and if you've walked there, you'll see kids and adults use it all the time. The total, I should mention to you, the total budget or the total grants the township has received is $2.25 million of other people's money or federal money and state monies that are brought for this project. And of course, there's cost of the township. So the total cost of the project are just under $3 million, I believe. And the construction is about $2.2 million in total. So most of the, well, there's 2 areas. Tree plantings along King of Prussia Road, when they were put in by the school district, they were done poorly. There's a lot of root girdling. A lot of those trees are failing. Most of them are planted too deep. Mr. Hosback came out and inspected all the trees along there. Also, most of our drainage facilities that are required for the additional runoff that this trail will generate. It's a pretty small watershed because we're really talking from Route 30 going into the woods there. We're putting in underground storage facilities in order to get our NPDS, and that requires the removal of a number of trees. So if we look at both along King of Prussia Road and Route 30, we are removing a total of 184 trees. And in this memo, you'll see that, and also Mr. Hosback's memo that I included, he looked at all these trees and he estimated that approximately 80% of these trees are in bad shape, don't have a long projected lifespan. There's a number of ash that are being removed, just a number of old trees that have just lived past their prime. In this memo, which hopefully I can scroll down to here, and hopefully you have in front of you, we went through our replacement trees, and the school district requested larger than the minimum size in a couple of areas along King of Prussia Road. So based on the 184 trees that are being removed, we're going back with 245 trees. The minimum size will be 2.5 inch caliper. but because they've requested larger ones, we've suggested some 3.5 to 4-inch caliper trees at a number of areas. And in the presentation that I'll try to click to here, let's see. I think at the end of this, here it is. This is a plant list of the replacement trees that are going to be going in. I think every one of these trees is a native tree. Mr. Hosbach reviewed the list. He said he thought it was a good list. It's a lot of diversity. We don't get too heavy on any one species. So that's really a very quick summary of the essence of what we're doing and why we're doing it. We will have tree protection fence up where the limit of disturbances, mainly along Lancaster Ave. The trees that we're removing on King of Prussia Road are the trees that were planted when the school building was built. And as again, a lot of those you'll see are failing. So, and actually, one of our inspections, Mr. Hosbach came out, there was a big tulip tree in the corner, and he alerted the school district what bad shape it was in. They removed it the next day. So a lot of this work is really deferred maintenance that, for whatever reason, the school hasn't done, and through this project, they're getting new walkways and a lot of new trees. So that's really a summary of what we're doing. Certainly, love to hear your comments or any input, recommendations on species, or anything else you'd like to comment on or suggest to us.
I have a question. Mr. Simone, is the school district completely on board with this list and the trees that are coming out?
The quick answer is yes. The official answer is no. How the PennDOT process works is before we were awarded the federal money in the project, the township and the school district having a dialogue. We've met with them at least 7 or 8 times, maybe more, to review this. As I mentioned, we've taken some of the recommendations. So we've been to a number of meetings. All indications are they're generally fine with what we're doing. The reason I say no is because until Mr. Rice works out the formal easement agreement, because the township is going to take an easement for where the trail is and where the stormwater facilities are. Until that's formally in place, the official answer is no. So I don't want to misrepresent that they've agreed to this. We believe everything we know, we believe they're going to agree to it, but it's those little details that Mr. Rice and the school district solicitor are working out. Sure.
Okay. And Peter, can you comment on what is the distance from the road to the path, to the trail?
It varies. If you look at if we go through the plans here, you can see in some places we're very tight to Route 30, sort of at the bottom. If you walk through if you have walked through there, you know, coming off of Route 30, here we are at the corner, but there's some areas where it's steeply sloping, and there's some old Amelanchier and Cercis canadensis in there now that are basically all but dead. So we're at the bottom of that little slope, so we might be 10 feet in some places, 20 feet in others, and maybe 30 or more in others. We tried to keep the pathway where the levelest areas are, where we had to do the right grading. We had to go through all our utility clearances to make sure we're not interfering with any of the underground or overhead power lines. We're not moving any power poles. And then when we get the corner of Route 30 and King of Prussia Road, we're basically filling against, you see all those contour lines there? We're basically filling to create a bench, because that's steeply sloping. We're moving that existing fence near the athletic field, although we're not going to be in the athletic field. And they're probably the better trees on the school district property are the ones that are along the athletic field there, but because of the grading, we have to take them down, but they're going to be replaced. So to answer your question, it varies. And then when we get along King of Prussia Road, going north, basically, wrong way, we're basically we have to stay 5 feet away from the curb. With the trail is a 5-foot green strip, and then our trail is 10 feet. So that's pretty much at least 5 feet, usually, from the curb line at King of Prussia Road.
Do you have a projected timeline for the taking down of trees?
Yeah, we have to have all the approvals done, which is mainly the easement agreements done by the summer. And this hopefully will go to bid this fall and be built in 2021.
I'm wondering if you are planning to do any kind of communication to the public, just because we have huge sensitivity about all the trees that were just taken out right across the street from where a lot of this is happening, so that they have some awareness of what's going on here.
Well, we've been to a number of Board of Commissioners meetings. I don't know how many over the last 2 years. We've been to the school district often. We can certainly come to additional meetings. This could be posted to the website. You know, it's really at the township's pleasure how much more communication we try to do. But I agree with you. The visibility of this. You know how it works. No matter how many people you try to reach, there'll be somebody who knows nothing about it, and the commissioners are going to get calls as soon as the first tree goes down. So
Yeah. You could even consider like putting a banner at the site as the construction is going on, you know, just off to say, please pardon our appearance while we beautify this area with a brand-new trail and 245 new trees. You know, something so when
I think that's a
people
great idea.
You know.
We did that for 2 parks projects. That's an excellent idea. And we also now have a public information officer, and
Yes,
she's great
Molly.
at getting out information on all our levels of media, all those platforms. So as this gets closer, we will we'll work with Peter, bring something to you, and we'll put something out. But I agree, those boards, you know, i.e. your tax dollars at work, are great.
The other thing too, and maybe we do this with your public information officer, you know, the whole idea of a trail, any community changes hard to accept. But, you know, the benefits of trail in terms of maybe incrementally a little less driving, healthier kids, if you could convince some of the high school kids to not drive their cars, but maybe if they're close, walk. The cross-country team's going to use part of this trail. It's going to be safer than all the roots and rocks they're running on now. So maybe part of that could be that information too, just to let people know beyond the replacement of trees, but the benefits of the trail would be also positive.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I would just like to say thank you. I think this is going to be a great addition. I live right near here, so I'll probably use it myself. And just to clarify, the trail itself, is that going to be gravel? I'm assuming?
No, it's asphalt.
Asphalt, okay.
Yeah, and just to let you know, we did look at porous asphalt, but in terms of the MPDS, it really didn't help us that much because of a lot of factors, and but we did consider that. So just regular asphalt will hold up the best, and we are still meeting the MPDS requirements.
Great. And it looks like the tree replacement formula was followed to a T plus, and then some with the additional larger trees, so all good.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
This is great.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, sorry, James, go ahead. We're basically voting on the plan to remove, I would say the plan to remove the trees. The compensatory tree calculation to assess point does work out, 245 trees required, 56 must be large canopy, and there's more than 56 proposed large canopy in the tree replacement.
Eileen, if we do have public comment regarding the trail, if we can,
Certainly.
before we vote. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like to come up and introduce yourself?
I actually came for the area that was disturbed from the cut down. I'd spoken with Bill White, and he recommended that I come and visit you folks this evening. But this is an additional disturbing surprise that you're about to do damage to the opposite side of the highway.
Yeah.
And I hope you, before you vote tonight, you might want to take a little time and think about it. Because what you undo, you cannot put back. This is not a car that you reassemble or a house that you repair. This is the center of your universe that you're about to tamper with in a wet zone. And I would urge you to possibly think beyond just this moment, it's a big moment.
Okay.
And a moment you can't undo once you vote for it.
Yeah.
My name is Warren Lewis.
Okay.
And I am a past resident of your town. And I guess I'm up before I was going to get up for the other project, but I did your Radnor train station when I lived here from 1995 till 2003. I did adopt and beautify with PennDOT on your Radnor on-ramp going northbound. And I also, where else did I do? I had 3 in this area. I'd done a couple, projects with PennDOT trying to beautify Radnor while I lived here. And unfortunately, this was the period when Dave Bayshore, blah, blah, blah. And so I was getting to meet, you at that time period. And unfortunately, things kind of fell apart at that point when I was trying to do, what I could for Radnor. And
Warren, maybe a question for you. What would you propose instead?
I've been doing landscaping for 35 years. I've been doing public beautification for 24 years. This is my 25th year, and that's why I've come to you tonight, kind of coming back to where I started. So I literally started here in Radnor when I started my public beautification, so I want you to know that. And Radnor is very important to me, and what happens in Radnor means a lot. And I've been working on Radnor homes my whole career, and I've seen property clearing left and right, Radnor and beyond, which is why this new development, considering what's happened on the other side of the street, is even, to me, more disturbing. And I was going to ask Peter, I think, about the porous pave, because 10 feet wide does have a significant amount of runoff, and then to take out an additional swath of trees and do, go into virgin, so to speak, territory to try to make a reparation for water seems like a contradiction to me. So this water issue and how that's going to be handled, to me, is important as a phase in this project. Another issue that I look at is twofold, is with the density and quantity of trees along the roadways, what is the consideration under power lines? Because if you plant, as you've seen everywhere, what grows up under power lines does not stay under power lines. And then you create another whole host of issues, from trees extending into the lines, over the highways. Maintenance is going to be another question that I don't know if you've even considered. The density and quantity of the plants, if they're going to overwhelm each other, because what looks great on paper, when it hits the ground in the density that it's going to go in, is something that you have to pay attention to, not just 1 and 2 years, but 5 and 10 and 20 beyond, your time here. And as an expert, pardon me calling myself an expert, I look into the future because that's my job. So when I talk to, people about their houses and about their trees and about their safety, I look, beyond what they see, because that's what I do. And so I come to you tonight to look beyond what you see and what you hear, and that decisions take time. It might take 5 seconds to buy a sandwich or a cup of coffee. It might take 10 minutes to buy a piece of furniture. It might take a couple hours to buy a car. And you're going to take votes on changing your community with I don't know how much time that you go in to consider these things.
So I think you raised some good points. So if you don't mind, Peter, what if you come back up here and let's address some of those questions? Okay.
Okay, which questions would you like me to address?
Can you talk about the stormwater management?
Yeah, stormwater management is dictated by the state. We have to meet those requirements. There's no choice. And PennDOT won't approve the plans unless we have NPDS approval, which we do at this point. As I mentioned earlier, the reason we did look at porous paving. Our engineer
Right.
looked at whether that would help us in terms of how we designed the stormwater management. We did extensive infiltration testing, and these soils don't infiltrate. They don't perk at all. We had miserable infiltration rates. So if we were to use porous paving with a gravel bed underneath it, it wouldn't go anywhere. So that was the first thing we looked at. So we did consider porous paving. In terms of trees under power lines, a lot of the existing trees now, if you
Wait,
go along.
let's just do one at a time.
Okay.
So stormwater management, are there any questions on that? So basically, Peter is saying he meets the regulations. Do we want more transparency on how those regulations are met, or are we okay
We can
with
send
that?
you all the engineers' calculations. We're happy to have you review them. Townships reviewed them. Mr. Nortini's reviewed them.
Okay.
PennDOT's looked at them. They know
So
we have
as
approvals.
Mr. Simone said, the NPDS requirements are, they're not negotiable. We have to meet them, how we try to meet them. Just so you know, township staff always pushes for porous paving. We did it at Clem McCrone, very successful there. But we have to look at the soil beneath. And this is one of those times when porous paving did not rise to the top as a method for stormwater management. We also have a huge water line that runs under some of the trail. And that also made it, that's one of the reasons why the stormwater management was pushed off the trail. We couldn't do extensive excavation because of that water line. So we tried to do our best. We did it in conjunction with the school. We would love to use BMPs everywhere and anywhere. It just, at this point, was unable to be done.
Okay. Any other questions on the stormwater management front?
One of the questions I have is the width of the trail, because of course the wider it is, the more it contributes to stormwater runoff. Was there some determining factor why it's as wide as 10 feet? I mean,
Yes.
could it be a little narrower, or what were
Yeah,
your
this
thoughts
is-
on that?
This section of trails is called a multi-purpose trail. We have to build that to PennDOT and ASHTO, American Association of State Highway Transportation Engineers, to meet safety requirements. This project, if there's one overriding factor for this project, it's safety. Both the on-road sections, we have, this whole system, this whole project is about 5 miles of on-road and off-road trails. And PennDOT's requirements are very stringent, and that's the requirements that we met. Yep.
Okay. Power lines, and whether you're using, because I must admit, we concur as well. We typically favor smaller trees underneath power lines with the idea that way they can stay, flourish, and not be trimmed or taken down or cause a hazard to residents.
Absolutely. And if you go along Route 30 now, where we do have power lines, you see a lot of the trees, large trees that were planted were under power lines, and as a result, the power companies come in and they basically butcher the tree to keep them away from the power line. We've been very careful not to put trees under power lines. We're using, if you look at the plant list, we have a number of ornamental trees that don't only get to 15 or 20 feet tall at maturity. So anytime we're in any proximity to a power line, we use a smaller tree. And if you look at the plans, we're very careful to keep those new plants away from the power line so we don't run into those issues.
Can you show us on the drawings where the power lines are?
Well, they're not shown on this drawing because this is a simplified drawing, but they basically run along the length of Lancaster Ave.
Okay. So is the trail underneath the power lines, or are the trees underneath
No,
the power lines?
here's this dark line here is the cartway, the curb line roughly. So you can see where the curb line is in relationship to the trail. When we get down here, the power line, the power lines are, we have to keep a minimum horizontal clearance from any vertical obstruction of 2 feet from the edge of the trail for safety. So along this section of the trail, where we are approaching King of Prussia Road, which I'm flipping through here, you'll notice all the new trees are on the inside of the trail. That's not the case now. There are some trees on the outside,
Yeah.
and they've been hacked to death. So that's why we've kept them on the inside.
And then with regards to maintenance, just, I think more so even plans to water over the first couple years.
There's my recollection is it's an 18-month minimum plant guarantee that the contractor is going to be responsible for. That adds to the cost of the project. After that, it's one of the negotiated items between the school district and the township who would maintain the trees. My guess will be it would be the school district, but that detail has to be worked out.
Yeah, at present, with the township, maintenance is one of the items we're discussing, but we do not have a maintenance plan, so right now I would not count on the township maintaining them. That could change in the future, but for right now.
Right.
That would be it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be part of the easement agreement or not.
Right.
I know it's been discussed.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just silly question. There's a trail there now, is there?
No.
Oh, there's nothing there.
Not along Route
Kind of a-
30. Right
Okay.
right
Kind
now,
Kind of a
Route
dirt
30.
path, James.
There's a beaten path.
Yeah.
The cross-country team comes out of the woods. They're internally, they come out of the woods somewhere in here, and they run along Route 30, and it's very uneven with roots and rocks, and the rocks are actually painted a bright fluorescent color so the kids might be able to see them as they're running. And then when we get to King of Prussia Road, there is a sidewalk here, and that sidewalk's being replaced. The sidewalk's in actually pretty bad repair. A lot of cracked sections, sunken sections. That's being replaced by this trail all the way up to the corner of Radnor Chester Road at the Penn, the old Penn facility up there.
And has there been, like, I'm not too familiar with it, requests for this to go in or something?
The trail?
Yeah?
This trail, I mentioned, we've been working on this for a number of years. We started the Radnor Greenway and Open Space Plan in 2013. We had a series of, I don't know, a lot of public meetings where we looked at because of the success of the Radnor Trail, which you all know, this community went from one that originally a lot of people fought the Radnor Trail, and now people love that facility, obviously. So this was and this plan's online. We had numerous public meetings over the course of over a year, and as a follow-up to that master plan, which was approved by the Board of Commissioners, we helped the township write grant proposals to get funding for this, and this is one of the major trails that's under development now by the township.
Yeah.
So it's had a long history of public scrutiny and several boards. It's been through several boards of commissioners, obviously.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have one other question. Was there any thought to putting the trees on the outside and putting the trail on the inside, so the trail isn't right up against Route 30?
Well, I mean, certainly anything's physically possible, but we were tasked with trying to disturb as few existing trees as possible, and also infringing. We didn't want to infringe. When we started the project, we made a promise to the school district we would not disrupt this corner sports field, and we're not doing that. So, physically, could you have planned it in there? Sure, but there would have been more disturbance, not less. And and there is when you go by Route 30, when you look, you'll recall that from King of Prussia Road back to about halfway the length of where the trail is, there's a Jersey barrier there. So it's not like people are going to be walking or running on this trail and they'll be in the road. There's a good separation. There's a great separation. I think you will feel very safe on this trail. You're not going to feel like you're in traffic.
Eileen, I don't know if you know, but the school district is undergoing plans to do some improvements for the fields and the back of the structure. So I think they wanted to keep the trail on this side rather than.
Okay.
Yeah, they've actually talked about making that corner field an artificial turf field maybe. if they could, because it's poorly drained. It's a reflection, I told you, we did a perk test, and that soil is miserable.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Peter.
Sure,
And I
thank you.
think, oh, sorry, let me just pause. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so thanks, Peter. And Warren, I think you have one more comment?
Yes, is it? I don't know if part of the project, if you had discussed something like they call it quarry dust or stone dust or tipple stone, which is a tiny aggregate that's rough, that doesn't roll. And you see that in many, many parks, cities, towns, boroughs, all over. Whereas you could probably put some drainage underneath of it without paving it, possibly only on the Lancaster Avenue side, and be more sensitive to the woodland and the wetland. And you could do maybe more paving on the exterior of King of Prussia Road or Radnor Chester Road, where you won't be impacting the nature so much. And I understand, all about the state and the requirements, and it's quite interesting that if you're compliant with the requirements, you can still destroy the nature, but you're in compliance. So to me, it creates this strange conundrum that you're within the law, but then it's almost like a permit to, you have to do these things to comply to do your project. It's such a strange thing to hear from me. And it's not just from you. I'm dealing with Pennsylvania Parks and Forests. I'm dealing with DCNR with these laws and requirements that people wouldn't even have a clue of. But, I mean, you guys have to do what you have to do.
Right.
And just hope you do as good as you can.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. So with regards to the tap trail, what's presented, the trees going in, the disturbance via the 10-foot wide trail going in, are there any more comments or questions? Are we ready to approve? Okay, all in favor? Okay, thanks, Warren. Thank you, Peter.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Now to the tree trenches. Old business. Tree trenches.
Ian, if you could please pull this up on the screen.
So I know that this got brought up at a prior meeting, and Lisa, who was here then, asked if we could defer it until a later meeting so that I could be here and answer whatever questions you guys had. I can certainly tell you a little bit about the genesis of the project and where we're going, but let me start by asking, do you guys first have any questions for me specifically about this? Because I just got a call and said tree trenches.
I think we're on the same page as you.
Okay.
So I think, I don't think we have any background knowledge of what this project is. So I think we would need first just an overview. What is this project? And then from there, we'll probably have some questions. James?
Yeah, I brought it up to Lisa last meeting. Is the township is doing this, right?
Yes.
In-house, right?
Yes.
And is this
Well,
coming from?
maybe. Mostly. A little
Most of
bit.
it. Is this coming from grant money or from stormwater money?
Yes.
Which one? Both?
Both.
Both, okay. So
Yeah.
we could use stormwater funds then maybe to plant trees in the future.
Yeah, so the concept is this. A tree trench at its most basic is it's a hole in the ground which is going to collect stormwater, and it's going to ideally be attached to a stormwater sewer as well. So it doesn't just collect the water and sit there, although you can have a more basic tree trench, which is basically just that hole. It's obviously not just a hole, because people would fall into it, and also if it were just a hole, it wouldn't be a tree trench, it would just be a trench. It's filled with specialty soil or filler, which allows the water to come in and fill up a larger fraction of that trench than you would normally see with something that was filled obviously with something pervious like, impervious like asphalt, or even something that was filled with clay or regular soil. And the real goal is to fill it with plants and trees, or tree if it's a small enough trench, that would not just let the water sit there, but would absorb the water and then bring it back out through the normal processes of respiration. Our plan is to put these in across the township in areas that are hardest hit by stormwater issues. We initially were hoping to do this with an outside vendor, and then Steve Norsini made the mistake of telling me that we could probably do it for a whole lot cheaper if we did it in-house. And so I said, well, let's, oh my God, do it in-house, and let's do it as much as humanly possible. The board last year voted to approve a single tree trench project, which would be in front of Cowan Field at the intersection of Cowan Park, at the intersection of Willow and I think Radnor Street Road. It would be on township property. The concept right now is that they would all be on Radnor property. We're going to do it. We're hoping we've earmarked as much as $40,000 that would come out of the stormwater fund. We have also secured, largely thanks to the work of Jen O'Mara, a grant for $500,000. What I am not sure about right now is whether we could use those funds in-house or whether we would have to go and bring in a consultant in order to get that engineered and installed. Ideally, I'd like to do it in-house, but that does bring up the issue. What I've been told by Steve McNellis is that we really only have the capacity to do 1, 2, or maybe 3 of these per year. The issue being obviously that in the summer months, our public works crews are doing things that you would sort of normally associate with the summer months. In the winter months, they're doing things you would associate in the winter months. They're cleaning up parks, they are shoveling snow, they are salting, they are plowing, so they don't have time to do this. And obviously, you're not planting a ton of trees in the winter, and you don't really want to be doing a lot of digging in the winter either, frankly. So we have limited capacity to do more than, I'm going to say 2, maybe 3 of these per year. So the $500,000, if we're only doing 2 of them per year and they only cost in the neighborhood of 40 grand each, it's going to take us 2 years, 3 years to get through that money. And frankly, I'd like to install more than that if possible. So if we could use the grant money with an outside expert and turn them into 2 that we get done rapidly in the hardest affected areas. And we take our in-house stormwater money and we turn them into a rolling system, the same way that we do for the super paved system for roads. So every year we're just doing 1, 2, or 3 of these in the most hardest hit areas. That would basically be the goal.
And how many trees are typically in a tree trench?
Depends on the size. I'd say budget 1. If it's an especially long one, maybe 2.
So the $40,000 that buys you 1 tree trench is 1 tree?
Probably. Looks like Steve is going to correct me here.
The one we identified on Cowan, for all the reasons the commissioner said, hard hit for stormwater, township property, we don't need anybody's permission, in an easement. I think the most you could get is 2 or 3. We're going to go as long as we can. We're going to make it as long as we can with the money the commissioner secured. I would say 3 max, 2 for the Shade Tree Commission to pick.
And Jack, I'm sorry, I didn't catch how much the grant funds were?
$500,000.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Is there an example of a place where this is working?
So this is actually from Philadelphia. So to save money, I have a plan that has been used in Philadelphia. Philadelphia does a lot of these, and Meliora, who does work for us, designs them. These have been around. This is nothing new. They've been around for a long time. It's a great way to install a BMP where you can, when you can. And I think the commissioner has a lot of foresight in being able to do these on these streets where the areas that are hard hit from flooding are also some of the oldest areas where the storm sewer infrastructure is small. It wasn't built to today's standards. So this isn't going to stop a flood, but with the more frequent rains, this will be a great help. And it's not just the stormwater BMP, you're getting trees. And the stormwater benefit from trees. And as they grow, this is a great plan the commissioner has come up with. I think it's very exciting from that standpoint.
What does BMP stand for?
best management practice.
Thank
So
you.
in this case, it's a stormwater best management practice.
And any of the proposed planned areas where these will be put in, are there any spots where trees would be taken out to put any tree trenches in?
That wouldn't be the concept, no. So this would be, at Cowan, there would be no trees that were taken out from my recollection of the site. Going forward, we haven't selected any additional spots. Ideally, if we got our druthers and we're sort of teleporting 10 years to the future, in all of the hardest hit areas, we would have, to the extent that there's not conflicting pipes under the ground or lines under the ground, we would have in the township's right-of-way a long tree trench that would run parallel to the roadway. And in that case, if we were going to do that, then there are trees that are existing right now. Frankly, the way I would conceive of this happening, given the rate at which trees are falling and colliding with houses in that area as we stand right now, is not that we would chop down trees, is that the trees that would, in the normal course of events, come down, hopefully, again, not into houses in a more controlled way, but they would then be replaced not just with a new tree, but with a tree trench and a tree inside of it.
Great, thank you.
Are we talking shade trees, large canopy? Is that what we're thinking for these tree trenches?
Whatever you're thinking.
Okay.
That's the carrot.
Ideally, yes. I think that you need to be mindful of the fact that this is a tree that's going to sit in amended soils, specialty soils. This is a tree that's going to sit, hopefully, with wet roots a lot of the time in a way that you would not necessarily see if it were just planted in regular soil. If it's going to be not at the Cowan location, but in the future, if it were going to be set in the right-of-way, then you have the potential that it's going to be girdled by the sidewalk on the left and the road on the right. That's not going to be a concern at Cowan so much. There is a road, obviously, but there's not a sidewalk adjacent to it. It might be nice if, as much as possible, you guys were able to come up with, I mean, it shouldn't be one species, because then every tree in that area is going to be one species, but just a couple maybe, where we could do a plug-and-play design so that you don't necessarily have to spend 6 weeks every time we have a tree trench. Although, if we're doing 2 a year right now, you do have 6 weeks between each.
And I have just one question, Jack, and it's more so just for my education, because this idea of tree trench is new to me. So I completely understand why they would do this in Philadelphia at 23rd and Locust, because that's a city and there's a lot of concrete. But in a park, that seems odd to me that we couldn't plant enough trees to actually soak up the water without having to do a tree trench. But I assume you looked at that and that wasn't possible?
So the areas that are hit by stormwater issues that we're thinking about, I'm going to say regularly, not in the sense of every week, but perhaps every year, are, as they stand, getting 2 feet of water or so, standing water, coming up to people's houses, that kind of thing. The trees that are there now, just indisputably, are not soaking up all the stormwater that is there. These tree trenches, even if we were, as I said, to teleport 10 years to the future, and we've lined every single one of the township right-of-ways, I think realistically are not going to solve that problem. What they hopefully will do is turn a 10-year storm and turn it into a 5-year storm. But to answer your specific question, would just planting trees be sufficient instead of a tree trench? And the answer is no.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, James?
Yeah, that area really floods, right?
I mean, there's a lot of areas, and it's not just that, I mean, you're thinking of Cowan Park with Willow?
Yeah, that whole area.
Yeah, that particular area, it is, if not the hardest hit area in the township, it's certainly high on the list.
And so
There
if you
are
were
others,
to
though.
build this at that cost, it's not really going to do anything.
So no, I disagree with you there. I
You
disagree
will.
with you pretty strenuously there. I'm going to give you a couple of different examples of why. The first is this is a pilot tree trench, and while this one in particular is unlikely to make a difference of, in any given storm, a substantial number of inches. I mean, we're talking a sliver in a major, major storm. The fact that we do this the first time is going to end up giving us the ability and the expertise to do this again and again and again, which over time adds up to a real change in that area. The second reason that I would disagree with you is that for any given storm, there is almost by definition at least one house where if the water level had been just 1 inch lower, then it would not have infiltrated their first floor, or it would not have poured into their basement, or it would not have floated their car away, or whatever it is that is the high-ticket dollar figure for damage. If by putting in 1, 2, 5, however many trenches, we lower the flood from 3 feet in a massive 10-year storm to 2 feet 11 inches, then there is someone whose house is going to be not devastated in the same way as it was without the tree trenches. And in conjunction with the other projects that we have going there, and we have some pretty significant projects that we're underway on, my hope is that this will, I mean, we're never going to solve the biggest, it's like anything. You show me a tree trench that's big enough, I can imagine a storm that's even bigger. But I think that we could get to a place where we are able eventually, particularly if we couple it with changes to the stormwater ordinance in general, and we allow development to then help us out over the course of time, we could get to a place where even the hardest hit areas of the township don't get flooded in the way that they are now. I'm an optimist, though.
So would you plan for more in that area, or is it just one?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there space for it?
So when you say that area, I'm literally thinking willow, poplar, plant, Pennsylvania, the whole area, ideally, like I'm saying, teleporting 10 years to the future, the entire right-of-way on both sides of the street
You're
would be
planning on
nothing
that
but
whole
tree
thing?
trenches.
Okay.
Hey, Jack, so that area, why does it flood?
This feels like an economics question that I had in
No,
college.
no, here, I'll give you a little more information. So I always understood the worst flooding in Wayne proper was because of underground streams, water tables that are high. So then when there's a heavy rain, those things rise up. So the water comes as much from below as from above. So which if I could be wrong about this, but if physics says those trenches would fill up, naturally just fill up. I mean, they wouldn't take the runoff, they would take the groundwater.
So you asked, I think, two different questions there. The first is, will this particular tree trench at Cowan just absorb all the groundwater? And I'm going to say, as a rough guesstimate, the groundwater is probably going to end up being synonymous with the height of the creek that is there. And the tree trench's bottom would be higher than the top of the creek. So it will not on a regular basis infiltrate with groundwater. The larger question that you asked is what causes it to flood? It is true that some of the flooding is caused by groundwater infiltration coming up or making the ground less permeable to stormwater because, of course, the ground doesn't perk in the same way that it would normally if it's entirely waterlogged. There's also a ton of runoff that we have, and we have a lot of piping that goes directly to that area because that's where the creek is. So it's not just that the groundwater infiltrates up to the top and then just keeps going. It's that you've got, I don't have the number in front of me, so this is going to be wrong, but it gives you an idea of an order of magnitude. Hundreds of acres all being piped to that one area. And then it's basically just a big basin because it's a creek bed and it stores the water right there as it then rushes off to the other people who are downstream of us, who I don't represent.
So I'm not an engineer, but it just seems to me that these trenches are little fixes.
Yeah, this is not, even if we do exactly what I want, where all the right-of-ways are entirely tree trenches, that would not solve the problem that you get in one of those major floods, like the April 13th flood that we had. If you had a 5-year flood, though, the tree trenches alone, once this entire concept was finished in that area, they might detain all the water. And like I say, there's going to be someone in a 5-year flood who loses a car or a shed in the back. If you're in the wrong place down there, even a 5-year flood, you might discover, if you're on Willow, sort of the lowlands, that your first floor is infiltrated. So if we can fix that, then that would make a real difference. I think that if you told the people in this area that a 10-year flood is really only going to happen once every 10 years instead of every 6 months, you'd have a sexual harassment problem.
don't know what that means, but.
I mean, you get
okay.
hugs and kisses.
What's that?
I mean, you'd get hugs and kisses from it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I've been driving all day. I'm a little loopy.
Okay. And then mathematically, do you know the quantity that a tree trench absorbs versus a normal tree? Just to give us an idea incrementally what the difference is?
I'm going to jump in. If you look up here at this cross-section.
Yeah.
Right? So this is like taking a knife through the tree trench and you're looking at it from the side. So if you see the tree that the Shade Tree Commission will pick, look at the volume around it. First, you have amended soils, which will allow better infiltration. And then you have a stone bed with piping. So there's considerable volume, and the commissioner's right. So there's undoubtedly that trees absorb considerable amounts of runoff. But in a big rainstorm, they are not pumps, which are just drawing it off the street. So this is an incremental step, and when you connect all those dots to all these little increments, it will make a difference. But if you just focus on this area, so you have the benefit of the tree, but look at the cross-section you get with amended soils, stone, and piping. So I can't tell you that it's X times more, but just by observation, you can see that in a rainstorm, that bed will hold X cubic feet of runoff at a given time.
Warren,
I'm going to go crazy with all your.
you're going to need to be at the microphone.
When you plant a small tree, it has about as much water absorption capacity as an infant does. Can drink, through a straw or a sip or a slurp. And not until this tree would potentially mature, some 75 to 100 years down the road, would you potentially have any water absorption with all of this expense. And I would make this wager to all of you tonight that I would go out there for free and I would plant 100 trees for $40,000, over and over and over and over. And you're going to have a forest, if you wanted a forest, where trees, if you know anything about horticulture, there are trees and shrubs and flowers that literally grow in water. That's what they do. You have to know their biology and their makeup. Bald cypress, dawn redwood, elderberries, swamp maples, on and on and on. If you make the right plant selection, you don't have to go through this elaborate expense that's going to be, unfortunately, a waste of time and money. And I would implore you to pick the right plants, the right location, and the right people to talk to do such a thing. And then as far as your other question about where does the water come from, well, clearly it comes from all over, the township feeding into, these creeks and tributaries. But there's ways to trap water on people's properties called berms and basins, just with soil where you can slow the water down enough time to give it, time to absorb before it creates runoff where it collects in these lower lying areas. And for free, I don't care. I don't care at all that I work with anybody. I give them my advice for free. It means everything to me that something gets done right instead of something gets done wrong. And I could be a fool and you have a lot of money that you're talking about throwing around, and between you and the school district and PennDOT and everybody, but maybe I'm not a fool and you don't have money to throw around. So I hope you're smarter than I am.
So I strongly disagree with our respected colleague from a stormwater management standpoint. This is a great benefit. The real reason we're here in front of this board is to put forth a plan for incremental best management practices through certain areas of the township. And specifically to the Shade Tree Commission, it's to choose the type, size, and species of tree. So it's a win-win. There is a stormwater management function, but as you can see, we're planting trees too. So I think it's a win-win. I think Commissioner Larkin is going down the right highway on this. And I'll just leave it at that.
We also actually can't plant hundreds of trees. We don't really have the space, because then Cowan Park wouldn't be a park anymore. And we can't go into private property and plant trees on private property. We just have the township right-of-way. So our options, if we're going to use it, is to either leave the trees there and do nothing, or put in stormwater management facilities like these.
Well, this is a concept that can be used other places as well.
Yeah. I must admit, from my standpoint, I still struggle a little bit because it's a big park and you could plant trees all along the creek, you could plant trees along the street, and it's not like the city where you're landlocked, and this makes perfectly good sense for a place like Philadelphia or anywhere in Wayne where you're landlocked and you don't have tons of land to plant trees. And I do think $40,000 could buy 80 trees, but all that being said, I don't really know if it's our call, because the proposal from the BOC is to take this money from the stormwater management, which isn't under our purview. You're not taking out any trees. You're going to plant a tree. So at least we're one up. So that, in some ways, that's how I look at it. And also, I do like the idea that it is a pilot. You know, so we do one, we learn, we adjust, and take it from there. So,
And the two aren't mutually exclusive. So this is one project. But what you had just said, planting trees along the stream bank, riparian plantings, absolutely could be another project funded elsewhere. So I don't want you to think it's an either or. They're not mutually exclusive. This is just one item.
it's just the funding. It's just $40,000 for one tree. $40,000 if we could buy about 80 trees and have them planted. So that's where it's just a little bit either or.
Yeah, the tree is basically free. The $40,000 isn't for the tree, it's for the tree
I understand,
trench.
but in essence, it's a tree trench with one tree versus 80 trees. So that's what I mean, 1 versus 80.
But we can't buy the trees from the stormwater fund.
Excuse me?
We can't just buy 80 trees from the stormwater fund.
Right. And that's what I said. I don't think it's under our purview.
No. I also want to stress that we actually do have a project right now that's going that would put in the riparian plantings that Steve was talking about along the creek bed. It's not something that we just could do maybe in the future. We're working on it right now. It's the North Wayne Stormwater Management Project, which, once we get to a place where we're ready to, we'll absolutely come to you guys for feedback.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you guys have any plan to measure the effectiveness of these trenches?
So yes and no. We absolutely would be measuring how much water goes into these, and from that we would know exactly how much water was being detained at any given time. It would be nice to know when they were connected to the stormwater sewer how much was flowing through them at any given time as well, and we can measure that. What we can't in a meaningful way do is measure how much it affects flooding in the area, because obviously no two storms are exactly the same. I can posit a scenario in which hopefully into the future it never floods again in Radnor Township. That's not necessarily because of the tree trenches, it's just because we got lucky. Flip side of the coin, the reality is the weather patterns are going to get worse and worse, which means that the flooding may increase in spite of these. That doesn't mean they're not working. It means that we're just getting unlucky.
Yeah, where I was going with that was that if you start putting in trenches, it would be nice to know if they're working before we keep putting more in.
So mechanically, I mean, this is essentially a hole in the ground. So we know how much stormwater they will detain because we can just calculate their volume. If it's connected to a storm sewer, then we'll be able to measure the flow rate, which is going to be a little bit tougher to figure out because it has to filter through the medium. But if it's a simple tree trench that's not connected to a sewer, like I say, it's just a question of length times width times depth, then subtract out the volume consumed by the medium.
Okay. So basically, I don't see, I see this as an informational topic, not one here for our approval, because there's no trees removed, it's not our funding, and there's one tree added. So with that, I would motion to close out this topic, and we're happy to select a tree when that time comes. Any other comments or questions?
I guess my final
Yeah.
question would be, for any new tree trenches moving forward, the volume of dirt being moved, and if the trenches are near other trees, do these projects still require tree protection or any sort of review by any other committees besides our own?
Most certainly.
Yeah, but the whole idea the commissioner had stated, so we're not going to go down a street that's lined with healthy, huge healthy trees, install a tree trench that compromises their root system, right? So we're going to place these where they need to be with this pilot. So
Understood.
the benefit is you have a stormwater project where you get 3 trees out of the deal.
Great. Yeah, no, I think this is, we have to try something, and this is a good approach in my opinion. But I guess my question specifically is, for every tree trench that is planned in the future, because there's only one being planned right now, will each one of those installations be reviewed by either us or anyone else?
The idea would be if there's no impact on anything else from a tree standpoint, we're going to come to you for the species and type and size of trees. That's really what we're here for you tonight, is to pick those trees. So as these move along, we'll be back here to lay it out, show you a location, show you any possible impact, and hopefully get your decision on what you would like to see planted.
Perfect. Yeah, I just want to make sure the township's upholding the same
Yeah, that's true.
rules and regulations that we uphold to our residents. That's all. I appreciate it.
Okay. Great, thank you, Jack. Thank you. We are now educated in tree trenches.
Thank you, Ian, if you could take that down.
Sarah?
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. A point of history that maybe you've forgotten. That was the site of the natatorium.
Yeah, I saw that on the website.
Largest swimming pool, outdoor swimming pool in the United States at the time, where they swam in the summer and skated in the winter. They didn't add water to it. They dammed up the creek and made the natatorium. And then the interesting stupid fact is, when men started to play golf, of course the women didn't go to the pools or skate alone, then they didn't have the families to keep it going, so they took out the dam and it just went back to the creek. So it's a naturally very boggy area. That's all.
Okay, great. So now we'll move on to the topic of the 476 Gateway project. And I'm thinking, Trish, to show this on the screen, is it best if I just plug in?
It's already up on the laptop.
Oh, great. So should, oh,
I think you
thank
need to do it from the podium. I don't know.
I can advance it from here? Oh, from the podium, sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Hello, my name is Eileen Brett. I am your Shade Tree Chair. It's interesting to see things from this side of the fence. See how this goes? Okay. Okay. So hot topic of the night, the 476 Gateway project. And so tonight's meeting goals, I would propose that one, we align on the ask. And this is the ask from the BOC regarding the sense and request. We align on the overall project goals. We review the tree survey outcome, actually how many trees were removed. We align on roles and responsibilities of this project, and we align on the immediate next steps, like maybe the next 30 days. Okay. I don't think I have to tell anybody in this room who we are. So I think we're up to speed on this, but in case there were folks that were not familiar with, this is who we are. And I would say we'll take public comment at the end, but to the tree committee, we'll go back and forth. Okay. I think everybody is aware of our vision, so we're good here as well, and we have great partners in Chanticleer and Radnor Conservancy. Okay, so I thought to start with, we would do a look back, and this will be about, let's say, 10% of this topic, 90% of the topic will be, hey, let's look forward. So if we look back, just kind of getting grounded in what the facts are. Okay, so we know 4, let's say to 5 acres of trees basically were removed at the 476 Gateway entry. The cost was $46,000 as funded by a private trust, and PennDOT is the landowner. And I think also it's known that we, the Shade Tree Committee, were not aware of this project, nor was the BOC. Okay. So the impact, we have stormwater management impact, we have noise and air pollution impact, and of course we have a habitat impact. Okay. The open items. So basically these are some of the items I listed as we were preparing for this, so just kind of clarification around the sense and request. Bill White, who is the acting township manager, was great. We have that clarification. Trees removed. So how do we, let's say, make the township whole since we have businesses and residents that need to follow our ordinance? So what would the requirement be for the township? Matt and Jane Golis did a great job in doing the survey this weekend, so we have all that information available. PennDOT. Steve isn't here, but perhaps he'll be back, but he did a nice job in talking to PennDOT, so we can just even understand what are the roles and responsibilities. We know they own the land, but what are the requirements, what approval is requested? And the last item that's open that at least I put a draft together, we can comment on that, are the roles and responsibilities. Okay, so sense and request. Let's get grounded in this first. Okay, so basically three main items. The first one, actually, I should say, is the role and responsibility. What is the role of PennDOT? So Steve will fill us in on that. The request from the BOC is 3 different designs, conceptual designs, 3 different pricing levels, and providing cost estimates for each so the BOC can evaluate which one to proceed forward with, and high-level timelines. And just township budget, it's a natural question, well, how much money do we have? And the answer really is minimal to none. Yeah, because really this was an unplanned expense, let's face it. So there isn't budget funds available for this. Policy per the township, any project is, hey, if it's greater than $7,500, it needs BOC approval. So if we were to spend anything out of our funds, we'd need BOC approval, and $25,000 we know automatically goes to a competitive bid. So I would say let's pause here, and Steve, if you can comment, fill us in on your conversations with PennDOT and what the roles and responsibilities are.
If I could, Madam Chair, Ian, could you switch to my Surface? Can you do that?
Okay, thank you.
So what we were directed to do was to stabilize, the site needs to be stabilized. Mr. Golis has been up there, I've been up there. So what we have here is basically a GIS photo of the site that's outlined. It's approximately 5 acres. We use LiDAR to show contours. And we met with, I called PennDOT, I also had a conference call with them, as well as, let me make this a little bigger here, as well as met with them. And I will tell you, they were very gracious in our meeting. So this is the site. And of course, this picture is before there was trees in this picture. And so what I said to them is, you know, we're going to make this right in basically 2 phases. So first and foremost, we need to stabilize the site from erosion and sedimentation control standpoint. They want to see that happen too, as soon as possible. So before the Board of Commissioners on Monday night will be a resolution requesting that Melior be awarded a contract, roughly $10,274, to do the design required to get this through a DCCD permit and with PennDOT input. Now, at the last meeting, I spoke to the highway road specialist, and I've scheduled a meeting with him next week, also with John Hosbach. We're going to meet on site. They do have some requirements. As part of our permission to do so, there's a relatively basic form to be filled out, but they want to see some more work. They want to see a PINDY. They want to see the plan. So again, been very gracious, been very good to work with to this point. They want to know what we want to do. They want to see that in an official plan. You know, it can't be a verbal or a sketch. It's got to be a plan that they can look at and show to the appropriate people. So the idea is phase one, we go to them with this E&S plan, hopefully get their approval, get their permission to enter the site, and then we immediately go back to the Board of Commissioners to put this out to bid, to get the site stabilized. So in general terms, what we're thinking, the steeper slopes would be hydroseeded, the flatter slopes would be seeded in hay mulch. The piles of chips that are there, 2-3 feet deep, would be spread. They are an effective means of erosion control. Actually, this line you see around the whole side is a line of silt sock. We would line the whole place with silt sock. There's a little ramp over here, or it looks like a ramp. That's where I walked up. That would probably get erosion control matting. And the other requirement they had was they don't want the stumps to sprout. They did not say we had to remove the stumps, but there's chemical treatment, and that's why John's going along with this guy. They can talk that. They said, we're not concerned. It's up your call if you want to remove all those stumps, but for the short term, they should be treated so that nothing grows from them. So that's phase one. Get the site stabilized, get it to grow. We talked seed mix. There's PennDOT seed mixes. There's one the arborist suggests. So next Wednesday, we're going to try to hash all this out and get something submitted. We're going to go to Delaware County Conservation District, Ed McGargy, get this submitted. Phase two is the planting in whatever fashion that takes. And I'm not even going to guess at what may come of that from the various things Eileen laid out. The stumps will be there. It's going to be an issue of, are they removed? Are they all removed? Now, just for your benefit, while I have your ear, so to speak, so this is fine from an erosion and sedimentation standpoint for handing in a plan along those lines, but it is not an accurate plan for design. I took the liberty of getting a cost proposal to actually survey the property, and so it comes in two parts. We would use a drone. This is like the perfect project for a drone. It's the least expensive. So the field survey would be a very high resolution picture taken from the drone overlaid with contour lines. The second step would be to take that further and actually come up with a plan like we always look like a blueprint that can be manipulated in CAD. So that if a designer, however the Shade Tree Commission goes, if you chose a designer, whatever fashion, that plan can be manipulated, drawn on, and used for volunteer bidding, however it goes from there. That total package, if you just want the picture, is $2,200. If we go for, and my recommendation, if this is something you want to do, we would go for the one where we get a site plan with the CAD ability, and that's a total of $3,700. I know that's early, but that's something you're going to need. Now, if you get a consultant, they can very well do that too. That can be included in their price. If you want to move forward and have something other than this, which is obviously not up to date, but is adequate for our purposes. But the drone, it's going to show the stumps, it's going to show the rock outcroppings, it's going to show the little remnants of the house, all that. So that's what we're working with PennDOT on. They've been really helpful. They've been great to work with. If the board approves that Monday night, we're going to get a plan together. We're going to go to Delaware County Conservation District, do whatever is required, and then we're going to go back to PennDOT and submit the plan as well as the permission request to do it. But I don't see, from our conversations, I do not see any large hurdles. They've been very good to work with. You can take that down, Ian. Thank you.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Steve, I have just one sort of overarching question about PennDOT. Are they willing to allow us to maintain this property? And where I'm going with this is, you know, any kind of planning plan, design plan, invasive, like getting rid of invasives, making sure if there are viable trees that come up off a stump, you know, just by themselves, that they're taken care of. What are we working with here in terms of?
So we're required to do that. So you know the island where the Easter eggs are, or where the stones get wrapped to look like Easter eggs? I don't know, 8 years ago, I went through this same process to get Public Works, the authority from PennDOT, to mow just those two little islands, one being the one with the rocks that look like Easter eggs. And on this, you check a box, 1, 2, or 3 years. I would check 3 years, because whatever you do this spring, summer, or fall, you need to be able to maintain it through next year. You're going to have to maintain it for survivability, because it's not something you're running lawnmowers around, so you're going to have to do exactly what you said. You're going to have to think of sustainability. You know, it's not some place where you can just put water bags around every tree and fill them up on a regular basis like we do in Wayne, where it's literally curbside. But I would think we would go, my recommendation would be we take the max, which on that form is 3 years, and in 3 years we renew that. If you really want to maintain this, and I'm thinking that the effort that this committee is going to put into it, the time, the effort, you're not going to want to just walk away in a couple years and see it get completely overgrown.
Yeah, I would agree. So, Steve, let me just see if I understand correctly. So, from a PennDOT perspective, they would approve the stabilization plan, they would approve the planting plan, and we would ask for the rights to do the maintenance.
Actually, the rights to do the maintenance, that's required. So on that permission form, the MS 688L, we're required to do that. So by what we're doing is the same thing with the Easter egg island. The township is taking this over with permission from PennDOT to maintain it.
Okay, that's great. That's actually good news. So with regards to the stumps and how they don't want them to sprout, am I correct in assuming that wouldn't have to be part of the stabilization plan, but that could be part of, let's say, what we call phase 2, the planting plan?
So that's what we're going to discuss next Wednesday. That was actually a very big concern, that all these stumps would start, you know, sprouting at one point. We'll discuss that with them. My thought, it's not part of the E&S plan. I told them this is strictly stabilization, so the stumps are there, they're holding soil. We had no intention of doing anything. But in the plan that comes up for planting, some way of mitigating them, either chemically or mechanically, is going to have to be shown, and they're going to want to see that. And whether you do pieces, parts, or however you do it. But yeah, I don't anticipate, unless they push that, anything to do with the stumps for the E&S plan.
Okay, that's...
And the guy from PennDOT, Darren's a forester as well, who I'm friends with, and they are a big-time believer in removal of stumps. Maybe we can talk to them, maybe it'd be part of our plan and see where it goes with.
Yeah, that's great. I think the good news is if it's not part of the stabilization plan, then we have time, and we can be thoughtful about it if we can have it in the phase 2 planting area.
And Darren told me, he's like, look, we don't want to spend the township's money. We're not telling you you must grind out X hundred stumps. He said, that is not what we're about.
Okay.
We just don't want them to sprout. Whether the plan that is come up with works around them, part of them, all of them, or none of them, they're fine with. But he said, we're not telling you to spend your money doing this, just so we're up front. They said that several times when I met with them Wednesday.
Okay, that's great. So before we move off of the PennDOT area, any questions for Steve regarding PennDOT, like their role?
Yeah, I guess 2 questions. The funding for both the stabilization and potential surveying, is that coming from just a normalized budget or just for public knowledge, where is that coming from?
So in my resolution, I noted that that would come from the general fund, and that's something that's going to have to be discussed by our elected officials Monday night.
Understood.
And then Steve, also, I think as we go through this, you'll see, I think we would like to be able to look at what you're specifying for the stabilization, because maybe that could be part of the long-term plan and actually be like a step in the door as part of the Phase 2 planting.
So absolutely, I mean, if time allows, we're trying to get this,
By Wednesday.
if the next meeting, I can bring something to you, I would. But again, our main goal is to get some type of specific grass to sprout. Like I say, there's going to be some hydro seeding. I wouldn't want to get caught up in it this time, although it may be a very viable method for later, you know, whether it be meadow, wildflower, and other things. I really think that's part of the next phase. This is really just to say, we want to keep this site stable. We don't want runoff. And what we do will not interfere any more than if we were on any property when it came time. So if there's grass there, it'd be like if you were on any project or where the chips are, they have to be moved, removed, whatever you wish to do. But absolutely, if we can get to this board before we have, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, we can look to do a quick turnaround. And then the $10,000, is that to generate the stabilization plan? And then to take that plan and send it out for bid?
That is correct. So that is to design the plan, that's to meet with the outside agencies to get their input, put together a true plan, bid specifications, and then we go to the board and request to receive sealed bids. So I'm thinking in that timeline, we definitely have time to come back. I mean, it's a pretty basic plan. It's very standard E&S measures.
Yeah.
There's nothing earth-shattering here from a technology standpoint.
What's the estimated, Steve, on that?
What's that?
Estimated time before we get the plan?
It all depends on the outside agency. So Ed McGargy's a great guy down at Delaware County Conservation District. So hopefully, I can't speak for the board, if this is approved, that's our first stop.
Okay. Great. Okay, James?
Yeah, is the township required to do this? Was there like an order or something that we have to? Why can't we just pass it on to the state?
We, I think there's a bunch of different answers. I want to jump in here on this one, but the most pressing one is that we ended up having at least one, and it's sometimes multiple lanes of Lancaster Avenue shut down during the last big rainstorm as a result of this, or at least adjacent to this. The off-ramp got shut down as well, so we need to move on this relatively quickly, and PennDOT certainly will not do so with the speed that we would want to. I think also there's a concern that since the township is the party that cut everything down, we would be the people who, whoever it is who would have secondary liability, would be looking to do it anyway. So in an abundance of good faith, we want to get out there and do it first, but also we just have the pressing issue of we've got to keep traffic going on our main artery.
Okay. Okay, we'll move forward. Okay, so now the rest of the meeting is all looking forward. What's possible? So here I just kind of put together some pictures to kind of paint a world that, one, we have great volunteers, great people who have stepped forward and offered their help, their advice, their services, and the things that we could create, I think, with the community and the township coming together could be quite beautiful. And we'll get into the project goals because, of course, it's going to have to be maintenance-free or minimal maintenance, but it could be something like some of the pictures we see here. Or even here. So what I'm showing you here, I stole these pictures from Jonathan Alderson's website, who many of you may know is a landscape architect who has volunteered at least to be like a consultant to us, not to actually do the design, but to help us through this. And he's done Penn Medicine. Here is an area that he planted with the yellow wildflowers to the extent that you can see them, so you can actually do something that is relatively low maintenance, not expensive, to even just hold back the soil. And then if we decide at some point we could create a forest, and, you know, all of that is TBD. But bottom line is, I think this is a great opportunity. Okay, goals. This is something we want to get aligned on tonight. What are the goals of this project? So this is basically my own brainstormed list. Stormwater management, I see, is the immediate concern. That's a must-have for resident safety. Taxpayer funding free. As mentioned, this wasn't a planned expense, so I think we have to do everything possible to keep the cost down, and that could be via grants. It could be volunteer type activities. It could be using township labor, you know, like Steve McNeilis's group. Maintenance free. There's no water in this area, and there isn't going to be. So we need to find a way to make it maintenance free. Aesthetically pleasing, that would be nice. It needs to be compliant with the Radnor, with our own ordinance, and we'll get into the compensatory requirements. And then my proposal is, just in talking to some of the experts in the township, that this really should be a multi-year project. This isn't something we're going to get done in 2020. And then I just leave it open. Are there other requirements that folks want to add on, or there are even goals that you want to strike? And they don't have to be on here. So I'll pause.
One thought I had, Eileen, was that it is considered a gateway to Radnor. Did we want to put anything to that effect? You know, the Radnor name in some kind of stone path that spells out, or like when you come down the ramp, it has the Radnor lion or whatever that is.
The griffin.
The griffin, thank you. Or some other way to communicate, you know, welcome to Radnor.
Great, you're right. Some type of signage. Okay. Anything else? Any other thoughts, Seth?
Yeah, I think we should definitely have a dedicated line item for public input, whether that's, you know, a design competition or a survey, or just some way so that we can officially accept commentary from Radnor residents.
Okay, great.
That's a thought, Seth, especially from our communication committee. Maybe we should put something out in the newspaper, some kind of an article, because there has been so much pushback about this situation. Maybe a goal of ours would be to communicate that, yes, something is being done about this, and we are addressing it in a positive way.
Yeah, I think we could speak with Molly and
Yeah.
see if she has any thoughts. And it could be as simple as, you know, a survey with 5 options, and, you know, the winning option gets the direction, or, you know, something more complicated, but at least some way to get some input.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really great idea. I had communications later, but we could include that as a goal, that it allows for the design itself that is selected allows for public input.
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
we should move on with phase 2 until we get buy-in from not
Yeah.
just us and all of the township
Right.
members, but also the residents.
If you were going to do that, I would also suggest sharing that with the commissioners so that they can push it out to their residents, you know, the constituents as
bet.
well.
One thing I don't have on here, I'll mention. I don't have habitat on here. So nothing about the birds, the bees, etc. I don't know if that needs to be a goal, or if that's a nice to have, like an option.
Eileen, I was remiss in noting that PennDOT wanted pollinators. He made a very specific mention of that, and I apologize for not putting
No,
that
that's
forth, but he said, I would like to see pollinators there.
Okay.
So, and I think we'll discuss that Wednesday, but he was very adamant on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that may fall in part of the maintenance-free aspect of it. If you have a lot of pollinators, self-sustaining, flowering,
Okay.
either trees or flowers themselves.
Okay.
I'm not sure where it would fit in on goals, but I think, from my perspective, this woods, which it was, we saw fox dens, we saw, John's seen a lot of deer activity up there. There has to, I would love for somewhere in this, in the goal, to have some goal that said, do we do nothing? Do we let it become the woods it once was again? Because I know PennDOT has a problem with stumps, but PennDOT doesn't have a problem with dead trees in woods because they're all over the place. So from my perspective, I think we ought to, before we get too far down the what great design are we going to have in a maintenance-free area owned by PennDOT, or I think we ought to think about like what was there that's not there that could maybe possibly be there again. And John Alderson sort of agrees with that concept. So
I think what you're suggesting, Matt, is the idea to see if the stumps re-sprout. Is that what you mean? And take advantage of those trees?
Oh, they will sprout.
But not all of them will. But is that what you're suggesting?
Well, so they didn't cut the stumps at the ground, so they left a significant portion of viable tree that has a root system that will push. There'll be a lot of bushes in a year out there from these trees that were left over, and then there'll be a forest there again, and there won't be any runoff from the stumps because they won't be stumps, there'll be trees.
Okay. Well, then what if I add on to the goals something about take advantage of the trees and plant life that is already there? Meaning allow time for them to regrow and see what's there before we destroy everything that's there.
I think
that's about right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we might be in that timeline anyway.
Yeah, yeah, okay, good.
Well, and that could be one of the design options,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah, it could even be part of a design, take advantage of whatever grows back and then augment it. Yeah, no, great idea.
And two, I think if we were to do nothing, it wouldn't necessarily come back exactly as it was. There would need to be some sort of, mitigation to help that along because, you would have unwanted weeds and other things sprouting that we wouldn't necessarily want. So
You're
that
right.
would be a part of the plan.
Well, so the way this property exists, around the ring of the property was heavy vining and lots of invasives, but in the middle where there were actual trees, there was less. So there's like snowdrops and crocuses up there on the top of the hill. But unfortunately, because it's going to be a sun garden now, all the weeds will come. They'll come furiously all over the property. But so.
Okay, so I will keep these 6. I will add the 3. The only one I'd like to mark optional, Ginny, if you're okay with it, could I mark the signage as optional, only given our budget? Okay.
One last thing, which Steve mentioned, the survey.
Yeah.
Whether or not that should be a specific goal in here, but I do like the idea of doing a third-party survey that could be used by other companies to come up with a plan. Or if we do a resident design contest or in some capacity a survey.
Yeah.
And I guess, so Steve, if you could clarify, I like the idea of the survey. Is there any timeline that you had in mind or approvals that you were thinking about for that?
So, again, I saw the shade tree was running, so I tried to keep running.
Yep.
And that's why, but, the directive with PennDOT was aside from that. So I did talk to one of our consultants. They could do it as quickly as Friday or in a few weeks. It can't be windy, it can't be raining, but I think it's whether a consultant does it or whether it's long-term or whether it's volunteer or whether it's just a tool. So remember, you're talking to an engineer who looks at plans all the time. I would advise, I think it's a good step. It doesn't have to be done now, but depending on which way you go, it will give you more than the PDF I showed you. And I know, Matt's got great pictures, but it will give you something that is scalable, that you can scale, you can count, you can take areas of, and start to make decisions or make suggestions, however you wish.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like there's, obviously no rush to
Right.
get that approved or decided on.
Yeah, we could put that in the Phase 2 part. James?
Couple things, the $10,000 for Meliora, for the design of the stormwater, couldn't we just hire like Mayfield at $15,000 and put up silt fencing and the tubing and get it all done with? Take time, go to the 6 months, everything will be green by then, and then go from there and see what people want to do.
So there's two things. We need a plan. We have to have a plan. This can't be me taking Mayfield out and saying, I want you to hide your seed here, I want you to hide your seed there, I want you to hay here. We have to have a physical plan to go to PennDOT with, as well as Delaware County. I believe this is going to be more than that. I believe it's going to be over. That's why we're anticipating a sealed bid, because of the scope and the size of this. So it would have to go before the board.
But if we wait to see what happens to the site, we can just pay somebody to fix the stormwater, the runoff, which is what we have to do immediately anyway.
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry,
we
I'm
could
not
save
following
more.
you. If we wait, we're going to have runoff.
Mr. Larkin said we need to take care of the stormwater because there's nothing there.
Correct.
So we had to put up silt fencing because we can't do anything else right now. And we had to put up probably the sock around there.
That's what's shown on the PDF.
Right. So just instead of paying somebody $10,000 to tell us we have to do that, and then pay somebody to actually do it, just get it done.
Yeah, but PennDOT is requesting that.
We
Yeah,
need
can
a
request
physical set.
roads to be fixed. Nobody's doing it still.
They want to see a physical set of plans, not a sketch, not a, hey, we're going to do. They want to see physical plans. We got to go to the county with a physical set of plans. So as much as I admire what you're saying, and it's a great idea, we don't have that option. We have to have plans provided that can be looked at, that can be reviewed. They're not accepting, I'm bringing a contractor in to do this. They want to see physically on paper what we're doing. They made mention of that.
I'm sorry. What would be the, if we didn't do it, what would be their reaction? Are they going to go after the township or something?
Well, let me ask you, why would we? I mean, we're working really well with them right now. They need it stabilized. My personal opinion is, why would we want to go down that path?
Because it's not needed.
Maybe a compromise is, James, I assume what you're objecting to is the idea that we're spending $10,000 just to come up with a plan, and then even more money to come up with the execution of that plan via a sealed bid. So by the time we're said and done, we're going to be easily $35,000 or more. So maybe the idea is, if there aren't hard and fast requirements about what the plan contains, maybe a plan could be done for like $2,000. It's just simply a CAD drawing and, identification of what is planted where in order to stabilize the soil. You wouldn't need an as-built plan, let's say, of the tree stumps, although we actually have one.
No, so what I showed you, that PDF, that's the basis for what we're going in with. Okay, but we're going to estimate the areas of the wood chips. I know, $10,000 is not a small amount of money. I'm following the procedures that I believe we have to follow with at least 2 outside agencies, which is plans. That's what James is saying. I'm not saying is wrong. My recommendation to do what's required of these outside agencies is to have physical plans, and the cost to do that work would preclude just bringing somebody in. If we can't just bring somebody in, we need bidding documents, specifications. So that $10,000 includes meetings with DCCD, meetings with PennDOT, maybe meetings with other agencies. I understand James's thought, but PennDOT wants that done now. It needs to be done now. They're being very gracious with us. I wouldn't see why we wouldn't comply.
Yeah, PennDOT is being very gracious. I mean, when we had that rain a couple Saturdays ago, I went through that area, and it was completely flooded out, more so than it normally is. The other thing that is coming down is all kinds of sediment and leaves, and then that's clogging up the drains. So our public works staff was out there on a Saturday trying to unclog the drains. So it definitely is not an ideal situation. But I think that the onus is on us in this moment to make sure that we are, first of all, Lancaster is a major thoroughfare. While it does sometimes flood over there anyway, the level of flooding for the level of rain that was there, I think, was disproportionate because of what has happened on that hill. I don't want to risk the township receiving any other fines or being liable for anything that could happen over there. So I'm going to err to the side of what Mr. Norsini is saying, and that we should follow the process that has been laid out for us by PennDOT. And it is frustrating and it is unfortunate, but I think it's what we need to do.
Yeah, I think we can move forward. I think in general, we can say we agree with following the process per PennDOT. I think what you're hearing too is objection of spending this amount of money, but realistically, it's not coming out of our fund. If the township's okay spending this money, then I think that's really your call. So I would say we move on. Okay? Oh. But we'll leave the finances to the township. If this is how you want to spend the money, that's up to you. That's okay. Overall, one last thing I left off is that, hey, the proposal, you've got scope, time, scope, time, and cost as your typical triangle for any type of project. So I would say definitively this is a cost-driven project, not a time-driven project. And of course, we'll shoot for quality always. So I think, yeah, good. I think we're aligned there. Okay.
Eileen, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm unclear on who actually produces the plan that PennDOT is asking. Okay, and that's, okay, so they will do the plan. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and this is just high level. What are the key items needed to meet each goal? So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time here. I think we talked through some of these items. Okay, so here's the tree survey results. Okay, so Matt, you did a great job. Do you want to talk through this slide?
Yeah, maybe I could actually put up the slides, the photos I took while I went through.
Okay.
Now, how do I don't want to screw you up here. Hey, Ian, can you put up my PowerPoint? Sorry. Thanks.
Which one's yours? This one?
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this is, Jane and I walked the property Saturday for a few hours. This was 2018. You can see it's pretty green. This is before, this is very, quite recent. This was right before the demolition, so you can see it's a definite woods of different characters and sizes and trees. This is looking west toward Wayne at the same property. Those are dead ash up there. So you can see, everyone knows how stark it is, but, so the stumps are, we counted 300 plus stumps, but a large part of the property, as Steve said, is under wood chips, so it's hard to tell if there's other trees that were taken there. So this is a list of sizes. So 36 and above, sorry for the distortion here, but 36 and above. Actually, Eileen has a better list. I'm going to run through these photos and then go to her, back to her presentation. So the tree species that we found based on our ability to identify bark, because that's all that was left, and in some cases leaves and branches, was three types of oak, at least one type of beech, a lot of white pines, a lot of Norway spruces, some tulip poplars, large quantities of staghorn sumac, some hemlock, a bunch of green ash, eastern red cedar, and then the vines were what would you think they were? John said he noticed porcelain berry on the exit ramp on the other side of this, what happened here. So I'm sure that's there. But also like a lot of little ground cover plants toward the center of the property. We found 10 stumps that were over 36 inches. And this is Jane's editorializing, but she feels, as someone who's on shade tree for 10 years, that maybe we ought to at least think about letting the site regenerate. So now I'll get back to your thing. Okay, so then, because that gives a list.
Yeah, no, that's great, Matt. Thank you. Okay. Oops. Okay, so what I did is I took Matt and Jane's great work and I just created a nice little table down in the bottom right-hand corner. If anything, the number of trees removed may be underreported per the same thing that Matt just said. So at least by the numbers and per the sizes, it totaled 268. It could be up and over 300 trees. If we look at the total new trees required, just using our simple tree formula, it's 422 trees are required. Okay, large canopy trees would be 144. Okay, so over the course of this design or even elsewhere in the township, we'll look to make good on this. Okay, proposed roles and responsibilities. Okay, so these are some of the large buckets of items that in order to get this project off the ground, we would have to align on who is doing what. So this is my best attempt, and of course we can edit this. So immediate stormwater management, I saw that as the responsibility of the township with PennDOT approval, which it sounds like that's what Steve described, so I think we're good there. I think if anything, the Shade Tree Committee, if we can just be a consultant in that design, which I think is okay. The 3 conceptual designs that are requested by the BOC, I saw it as the Shade Tree Committee that we would be responsible for outlining the scope of those designs, getting those designs, and then approving those designs, meaning the recommendation of what would be selected. And actually, to Seth's comment, I put in here that we would have volunteer input. Meaning it could even be volunteers generate the designs if we end up having a design contest, or it could be the volunteers vote on which design is most recommended. And this, of course, would be after we align on some type of budget. It wouldn't go out for voting on something that the BOC would say, hey, we're never going to be able to fund that nice $1 million project. You know, so we would make sure that that, you know, is all workable. The design selection, and actually that's actually what I was speaking about, is that the BOC would have the final approval on that. They would actually be the ones selecting. We would give a recommendation. The volunteers would be consulted, maybe via survey or voting. I thought, and to Steve's point, PennDOT would be an approver. Whatever that planting design is, they would have to approve it.
Yes.
Okay, yep, so we have 2 approvers, the BOC and PennDOT. I did put down a do-nothing evaluation, because with any project you have to look at, well, what if an option always has to be do nothing? You know, what does that look like? So I thought we would look at that type of evaluation. And that could be, that obviously would be us doing the work. It would be the BOC having the approval on that. That could either be one of the 3 designs, or it could be a 4th design, however we want to look at that. And then again, the volunteers could be consulted on that, same manner. Project leader and project execution and budget management. Here you can see I have it completely blank because I wasn't exactly sure who should be leading and executing this project, meaning who should this team be? What's that? Oh, okay. And then the budget management as well. So I'll come back to that, and we can take some input on that. For the bid generation and award, we would just follow our typical Radnor Township policy, which means the BOC would approve it, and the township, Steve Norsini, would put together the bid package and send it out for bid. Grant generation, that's definitely an option here, especially, as we talk about, wouldn't it be great if this is some type of all-volunteer project or mostly volunteer project? So I think we would have the responsibility of writing the grants. Per the normal grant process, the BOC would approve them before we actually, submit the grant. Communications, we talked about this. We've got the great team of Ginny and Seth working along with Molly and the township, so I think we would be responsible for the communications. The township, Molly would assist us in that and also approve any communications before they go out. And I think we could, of course, leverage the volunteers organizations, folks like the Radnor Conservancy that have a newsletter, or anyone else that would be willing to help us get the word out on what it is that we're doing. Same thing with volunteer recruitment. We would be responsible for identifying what are those volunteer opportunities, and then recruiting volunteers. Maybe it's to plant whips of trees, maybe it's to help us write grants, or even just identify what grants should we apply for. There should be all sorts of good stuff to do. And then other. So those were kind of my big buckets of things that had to happen. So I'll open it up for comments.
The only thing I'd be concerned about with volunteers, and actually with Township, I don't know if, does Public Works take care of the strip along there, Steve, do you know? Like cutting the grass?
It's as part, so, James, you mean between the curb and like the cliff,
The
if you
hill,
will?
yeah.
That will be part of this, so.
But previously?
I don't believe they did. So as part of our discussions, that was one of the things, they said, the island is the island. So we would take over that. We would have to keep those inlets clean. So there's an opportunity. Do you keep it grass? There's a lot of trash that gets there, needs to be picked up. Or has that become something else, wildflower, whatever? I mean, there's a lot of opportunities on the 5.1 acres or whatever.
Yeah, my major concern would be with volunteers or even township staff. That seems like it's a little bit more hectic in that area than where the Easter eggs are, and you're putting people. You have a big slope there. It's going to be a liability, I think, for anybody working on.
I think that the township staff, we're required to, as part of this, to indoctrinate them on the requirements of PennDOT for maintaining that. And again, I have to run it through PennDOT. I think specific times, if whatever the plan is came to be volunteers, I think using volunteers at specific intervals, as Eileen said, planting whips or doing something, that's one thing. But that general maintenance around that ring, I think is going to fall, I'm not going to speak, is going to fall to Public Works. That's not somewhere where we want somebody volunteering.
Yeah.
If you had like a vine day where everybody goes up and makes sure the whips are clear, that's different, but not the everyday or weekly maintenance.
Gotcha. Yeah, and with the grass, if there is grass there, that means that will be weekly township guys there too, putting them in harm's way. So I think we should think about what the plan will be there for the sake of people's safety.
I totally agree, and we've got maintenance, minimal maintenance listed as one of the goals to that point, but I think you're right, James. I'll add maintenance on here as one of the major items and put down that the township would be responsible. Yep.
So my only comments would be around project leader, execution, and budget management. I think that definitely falls on the township as well as the BOC.
So, let's see, so I would put that the project leader, execution, budget management, the responsible party would be the township, the approver would be the BOC, and we, the Shade Tree Committee, would be consulted. We would minimally follow our process, so we would have to see all plans ahead of time. Is that what you mean, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I
Seems
think,
so.
you know, as the township goes through their normal, whatever the normal process would be on this, you know, if we're going to plant a bunch of trees, yes, it would come to Shade Tree and whatnot, but they should be the ones directing the work. They should be the ones, you know, managing if, you know, it's a consultant or whatever, because it will be, if there is any funds to be spent, they will be township funds. Even if it becomes grants, it still becomes township funds.
Anything else on here?
The three designs, I think that's, you know, a good idea to come up with options. One of them may be to do nothing. But if we're unable to find volunteers of the professional sense to do free designs, and we're not willing to provide shade tree funds to come up with designs because it doesn't necessarily affect the canopy directly, is the township willing to provide some budget for professional designs?
So I think that's what, you know, we're looking for from you all to provide. I mean, that recommendation to us, that's what you recommend, then
Okay.
that is what, you know, that will be then fall on the,
Okay.
the staff and the BOC to figure that out, you know.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, what I would see us doing is we could scope out what is desired so that the landscape architect doing the design has the best chance to hit the target the first time out of the gate. So we don't end up somebody submitting a design that's like $1.5 million, which we know, okay, we're not going to do this, or something that wouldn't fit our goals. So I think we could do the scoping, and maybe I can detail that out here to make that clear, that we do the scoping, the project scoping for the 3 designs to be generated. We could submit a cost estimate to the BOC for them to say, yep, we approve this funding.
Speak into the mic. Remember, it's being recorded. When you have your back to the mic, the public listening to it aren't going to hear you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Okay, so I would say my proposal is we can detail this out here. We as a Shade Tree Committee can come up with the scope and what basically winning looks like for these designs. We can come up with a cost estimate, and then we can get the BOC to basically approve that cost estimate. Steve could go out to a bid package if that's the way we decide to go, depending upon where the cost estimate is. It only has to be competitively bid if it's over $25,000. And from there, we could have a professional do the design, you know, go along that path. So I can detail that out here more, so that's clear. Okay.
And two, I think coupled with what we come up with for designs, we should definitely interweave that into a resident survey or something so that the options that we do present to the board are in alignment with the residents to some extent.
So we staff is here to help you in any way. So we do requests for proposals all the time. So based on what Eileen said, I mean, you can craft that any way you want, that stating that the consultant will have to include these design techniques, these design elements in 1, 2, and 3, as well as, you know, polling. You can put all that in there. I'm here to assist you. I write RFPs all the time. You can give me the scope. And that's however you want to do it. I just want to let you know we're here to help.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so the only other thing I would add around cost, and now you'll know what it's like to sit in the Board of Commissioners seat, you know, it's going to have to be reasonable. It's not going to, we're going to have to be considerate of the fact that, you know, we have a budget. This was not included in the budget. This was not something that we ever, as I have said to people, if I had all the money in the world and I could put it towards 12 projects here in the township, this wouldn't even make the list. So it is something we do need to fix. We do need to go back and try to remediate, but I would just, so again, pretend like you're sitting in a Board of Commissioners seat and everyone's coming up to public comment and yelling at you and saying, don't spend our money. It needs to be something that is reasonable and thoughtful. And if it is something, I'm not saying that I don't want to speak for the board because, what I think and what other people may think could be different things, but I'm sure that everyone is going to want to see something that's reasonable, and it may also be something that is a phased-in plan. Maybe it's not something we're going to spend all in one year or even recommend that. It could be something that is phased. So that's all I'm
Lisa,
saying.
I think we totally agree with you. And that's why we even have down in our project goals that it's a multi-year project. We know right out of the gate we're not doing this in 1 year. One, it will help kind of spread the expenses over, let's say, 5 years, but also that way we can take advantage of whatever grows back that we like. Why take good species out if we can leverage that? And I think what you hear tonight, if anything, we're a little bit more cautious about spending money, and that's why you hear us challenging something like the tree trench, for $40,000, or just even the stabilization for, which will be $35,000 or more. So, yeah, so I think we're right there with you.
One follow-up question. Are there any projects in Radnor Township that are earmarked for this year that could be replaced by this? Any lower priority projects? I know you just mentioned that this would probably fall nowhere on the top 10 list or even close to that, but are there any other projects that could be replaced with this?
So we approved a budget that had no funding for any our capital projects. We raised taxes to fund the fire department and to address their needs. We do have a bond that we went out for last year, but that has very specific projects in it. And I know that and Steve probably can speak to this better than I can, but there are some very specific parameters about pulling out projects that we put in that bond and substituting projects in. I don't think that we can easily do that. So, there is, we do have money in the general fund that is, funding projects that we know are coming up. There is money in a stormwater fund, but that is to fund specific stormwater projects and things to address. So, is it something we would have to look at and we would have to get creative? Probably. Is it something that moving forward we would build into the budget, depending on what it was? I would think so. But in this moment, to say that there are projects that we would, and Steve, I don't know how you feel about this, but to say there are projects that we would not do because of this, I don't think there's that many projects that we can say that exist that would fit that bill.
Understood. Worth the ask. Thank you.
Yeah.
One other thing to consider is if 3 years from now, we're probably going to have to go through the shade tree again to cut down all the trees that grow, because they're all going to grow up to 10 to 15 feet, and we're going to have to clear it again.
Why?
If we don't plant right away, because it's going to grow back.
Okay, why is that a bad thing?
Because same reason why it was bad a month ago to cut all the trees down, it's going to happen in 3 years again. We're going to have to clear it.
Why do we have to clear it? That's the part I'm missing, James.
Because we're not allowed, because they want a plan in place, right?
But the plan could include, let's say hypothetically, the 10 oaks that grow back. We could, it was something that Jonathan Alderson had mentioned to us as well, is that, hey, likely these stumps, some of them will grow back. You could wait and see what grows back and take advantage of it.
That's my point. But if we do a plan to landscape that area, to get to that plan, we're going to have to cut stuff out again.
That's where,
unless we scrap the plan and just let the good stuff grow again.
Or that's where we could look at this multi-year plan. Like, we could stabilize it this year in 2020. We could wait and see what grows back in 2021, 2022, put together a design plan that takes advantage of anything that's desirable that grew back and takes out anything that is undesirable. So I think that's all things that we have to figure out, like what does the scope look like for this project? What type of design do we want to see?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's going to be pushback again from residents saying, why don't you just let it grow?
Yeah, no, I think, but I think that's absolutely one of the items we have to look at, the so-called like do-nothing plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we definitely got to put that on the table, and maybe it's do-nothing plus stabilization and pollinators for the birds and something that is minimal maintenance. You know, that could be a great plan. Let me see if I can go up. I mean, it could look like this, just by coincidence. Oh, geez, not that one. Could look something like this. You got a bunch of flowers, they pollinate it, you got a bunch of evergreens, not all the same species, a little biodiversity in there. But that could be a very low-maintenance, inexpensive plan.
And actually, we discussed with PennDOT the use of conifers. A lot of deciduous trees, leaves, clog inlets, things like that. Nothing definite, but that was actually one of our conversations, a nice mix. If that's what occurs, I don't know what's going to occur, whether it be volunteer growth or the plan.
Yeah. Yes, so all good things to consider. I'm not sure what that is. Is it pretty? Oh, okay.
Do not say that, Jane.
Wake up on the wrong side of the bed this morning, my friend. Would you take public comment on that project before you move on?
I will once I think this is the last slide, Sarah. So we're almost there. So this one is quite the eye chart. Basically, what it's meant to outline is just, hey, what's going to happen the next 30, 60, 90 days? And I think realistically, we just need to concentrate on the next 30, maybe even 30 to 60 days. I think that would be enough. So the first item up was just the prep, the survey, the site. That whole first area right here has already been done. Survey the site, calculate the trees required. Thanks again to Matt and Jane. And then provide stormwater management. Steve and the township are all over that, so I think we're good there. The green area here in the project is really aligning on the project goals. We talked about that tonight, so I think we're there. I'll just augment them per our conversation here, align on roles and responsibilities. We don't have a high-level timeline, but that's something we would just have to come up with. And I think we can do that offline regarding what is, year 1, 2, 3 potentially looks like, just a high-level conceptual timeline. I think in the next month, we can start to think about grant opportunities, what's out there. Maybe even some volunteers could help us identify, grant opportunities that we could apply for. And then the same thing with regards to volunteer opportunities. And realistically, maybe we have some time on this. Since phase 2, the actual planting wouldn't take place this year. That would be something that we know minimally doesn't happen in 2020. And I think those are the main items that would happen between now and the March meeting. Are there other things that should happen between now and the March meeting? I'll add one item to the list, actually. And I think it's just us coming up with what is the scope, let's say, for the 3 designs that are to be quoted, maybe the do nothing and then 2 other designs. What does that scope look like?
I think the do nothing. Second option could be plant a bunch of wildflowers and let trees come up and mitigate. And then the third is a nice planned, architected design.
Eileen, I would suggest between now and March, we should get something out to the public regarding what's going on with this property.
Okay, great idea. Okay. Anything else?
Back to
Thank you.
Yes, Eileen, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, all of you, really. Thank you.
It is. It's a good opportunity, and a lot of folks had input here. We tapped into a lot of expertise. So now I would say let's open it up for public comment. So Sarah?
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. I know where you could get the money for it. Get the whole township to change its behavior and reduce the amount of trash and recycling, because it costs several $100,000 more than was budgeted in 19. So if you can do that, good luck. As Lisa said, the budget is tighter than a tick, and there really is no money. And as a senior on a fixed income, I have great resentment that my tax dollars would go to fix this. This is an area that nobody looked at. We drove past it at 30, 35, 50, 60 miles an hour, and we didn't see it. We didn't know what was in it. We didn't care till it was gone. So I think that I like Matt's idea. It's called let's see what happens before you rush in. The second thing is, remember, most of it's going to be over your head, and you're still going to be driving down the highway at 30, 35, 40, 45, 50 miles an hour, so you're not going to stop. I have personal experience of working with PennDOT with volunteers. I got the great job of planting an area on I-95 in Chester because the funder decided it would look pretty. You cannot have volunteers. It's not that you can't, PennDOT won't allow it. So I was out there for hours with buckets of water planting ornamental grasses. There's not a piece of it left, but I know that from personal experience. And again, I just reiterate what Matt said is just do the stormwater mitigation, get it, the runoff. I heard it on WHYY that Saturday. All of a sudden, there was an announcement that the northern bound Blue Route at exit 13 was absolutely flooded, and I thought, I think I know why. So it's got to be protected. But I mean, one of the commissioners said, oh, we'll just take $1 million bond and plant it. Please remember, the new assessments are coming out. And in general, the county is saying they're going to be double what they were. So we all need to look at this very carefully. This is not a time to do a fly-in-the-night perfect thing that people are going to drive by at 30, 40, 50, and 60 miles an hour. It's a damn shame, but here's we've got it. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll take Laura, then Warren.
Laura Luker, 808 Millmar Road, and Radnor Conservancy. Eileen, great job. You know, I just think about where we were, and thank God you're at the helm right now to be able to handle what has been put on your shoulders, because this is a huge project. A couple things, really what I want to what I just want to get to is more so about the plan and the maintenance. Nobody really understands to do a plan, a beautiful plan, requires maintenance, and we don't have the staff or the volunteer or the money for that. A wildflower is not easy to do. It's doable, but it's really takes a lot to maintain. So you have to be very careful about how that gets looked at. I would really encourage going out there, painting the stumps that are the acanthus, that are the invasives, leaving the ones that are not, seeing what comes back, do the grassings, see what happens. I mean, obviously, we're going to stabilize first. I mean, that's most important and should be done ASAP, no matter how much it costs. Just get this done properly and through the proper protocol, so we don't end up with another problem again. But to be able to have a plan that really is, as Sarah was saying, you have to really think this one through. This is not just have a beautiful plan. This is trying to work with a budget, trying to work with what we have. And, you know, unfortunately, it would be great to have this beautiful thing, but it's not necessary. It's really not. It could grow back to be a nice natural habitat and environment, but it does require some maintenance to that, maybe not as much if it was a full plan. And the other thing about volunteers, I just know it's really hard to get volunteers to really do long-term work. To plant a day, you know, a day out planting, of course. But you can't get people to come back and do the real maintenance at that level. And Public Works, they are so overworked right now. They can't handle what they're doing right now. So to have them on that level is really a task. So I'm going to have to really be careful on that whole planning piece. But anyways, I think getting the word out, what's going on is really important. No signage. I think we're running, that would be a big mistake. People will think it's like the billboard scenario. And what a mess. But anyways, sounds like, you know, I feel like you really are taking this on with great pride and energy, and thank you.
Well, thank you. We have a good team here, and we have very good partners in the Conservancy, so we know we're going to be counting on you guys.
We're all rookies. This is the thing. It's like, gosh, we got dumped on a job that we have no idea what we're doing. And that's why we have to look at staff here, and I hope, you know, you guys, you're going to have to really step it up, please. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Laura.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
We have a billboard ordinance in Radnor, which was put in very quickly when Burkowski. So I'm not so sure any kind of signage. It would have to go through design review, and it would have to adhere. And the only real place, and it was done intentionally, the only real place that you can have billboards in Radnor is along the railroad tracks. And that was done intentionally to keep them off Lancaster Avenue, because they were bound and determined to put big billboards. And I'm not saying you would put that size, but I think you might bite off more than you can chew by even proposing it.
Fine with me, Sarah. I'm not wedded to the idea.
I just wanted to give you some reality.
Yeah,
if
appreciate
you didn't
it.
get into the billboard fight. I mean, that went through slick because
I see what Lower
Burkowski
Merion's
was on the
going
tail of and it's the same guy who wants to put them back again on Lancaster.
He's
and
very
in Haverford
aggressive.
Township.
I know who you're talking about, yeah.
Don't give him ID.
I won't.
Okay. Warren? Yeah, sure.
After I left your Radnor train station, I was living there. I got the bright idea to do the Adopt a Highway with PennDOT, as mentioned. And I don't know how many of you go down the Schuylkill Expressway and past the Gladwin on-ramp. Mr. Norsini and Mr.
Hossback.
I planted all those trees by myself. You're seeing what they look like now since 1997, from one man, 3 tractor trailer loads of trees by himself in the summer of 1997 when we had a drought, and I was driving water from my house here in Radnor down on my trailer to water those trees day and night. And you see the fruits of my labor today, and everybody who lives in this area has me to thank for that particular endeavor.
And did you say that's the Gladwin on-ramp to
The on-ramp to the
76?
Schuylkill Expressway. All those trees were planted by me, one person, my own money, my dedication to our community. I've done adoption with Fairmount Park, if you know 3rd and Bainbridge. The horse fountain and the planters on either side of those, that's Warren Lewis by himself, Friends of Bainbridge, your Wayne train station, I was there. I've been in many places you don't know, but with the knowledge and experience of 35 years of landscaping and 25 years of public beautification, I don't know that you can actually find somebody with equal or greater experience and time and dedication than I've put in, and it all started here with you and your predecessors. And knowledge can save money. Knowledge can prevent mistakes and having to spend even more money. I appreciate Mr. Golis and Ms. Jonathan, the other architect, where he says some things can grow back with time. But to me, the mistake will not grow back the way it was. And people have told me, you've seen these garden makeovers, and I can do a garden makeover faster than you can make a salad sometimes. And I believe that if you act sooner than later with full, a full plan, instead of the long term, I believe you will be accountable for the mistake, that it would be repaired sooner than later. And I believe you can actually do it with virtually no money if you are honest with people and say, we made a mistake, we want to attract people to come to your community, to your rescue, just like you could do for somebody else at their time of need. And at this time of year, you could not be luckier if you handle this properly, whereas the nurseries are just about to receive new material. And just like in the fall and the summertime, in the spring, they purge themselves of leftovers. And all the contractors, such as myself, who were out collecting, have materials. I've done this so many times where I'll go to a nursery and say, do you have anything you can donate to me? And with my name and my reputation, I make friends of strangers. And this is what I believe you could do also, that this is a time of need, and if you are upfront and you put out the word that you want 400 trees, I would believe by the end of the week you would have more than 400 trees. And if you got together a group of designers that can work with your plans, I believe you could put together a plan quickly if you find out what's available. You can get equipment in once. Contractors can donate, equipment. This is just like the Philadelphia Flower Show. Philadelphia Flower Show is about 5 acres. You have about 5 acres. I've actually even received materials from the Philadelphia Flower Show that the contractors don't have any place to go with them, and they will destroy the plants. They'll absolutely just destroy them because it costs money and they don't have anything to do. You can ask, the Philadelphia Flower Show, do you have anything that we could have? You can put a word out to nurseries far and wide that go, all over the airwaves and the internet, and you will receive more than you ever dreamed of. But what I want to say to you tonight is, you can make this go away quicker than you could ever imagine. All you have to do is want it to happen sooner than later, instead of drag it out.
Thank you, Warren. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
I would.
Thank you.
I have one other comment to make. Warren, that's interesting that you raised the idea of, let's say, doing a one-year plan. So would you be willing to put together a proposal what a one-year plan would look like?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Because we could look at that versus a multi-year plan, and maybe also the idea of 3 designs,
Well,
do
the other
nothing
thing is
and
with your
something
idea
higher.
of the hydro seed, you could do it once,
And be
you know,
done.
all included,
Yeah.
where you have the truck there once, and it's part of your overall plan, and you may be able to get it donated.
Warren, don't give your secrets away, my friend. Putting a bid in, do not give your secrets away.
I'm such a small fry. It's so much easier to do what I do under the radar than over the radar, because working with PennDOT, as you know, is not so easy. And I was up to SEPTA's office, and they had me in to thank me and to say, you know, if you want to work for us, you got to go above board and you know, go through the bidding process. And I looked at all the rules and regulations, and I say, you know, I go where the path of least resistance is all these years, and the higher the hurdle, the less I'm interested. But to your answer is, if you want to put something together as an overall package, you can do this very quickly, and I'd be happy to volunteer.
That would be great, because
And
that
that's
will
why
give
I
us a
came
whole
to-
different point of view.
That's why I came to Bill White, and literally what Matt was saying and some of you were saying as far as, you know, the bits and pieces, I had outlined everything practically word for word in an outline, direct to Bill.
Okay. Well, that's great.
I know everybody wants to go home, thank you.
Okay. I think we can say meeting adjourned. Everything else is tabled for next month.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, great job.
Yep.